Poor single dad finds beaten paralyzed woman on roadside, shocked to learn who she is. When struggling carpenter Eli Porter found a broken woman left to die in a foggy ditch, he had no idea that carrying her 3 miles through the mist would unravel a conspiracy worth billions. The paralyzed stranger whispered a name that would change everything, but first, he had to save her life. Stay with me until the end of this incredible true story, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale of second chances has traveled. This is a story about finding hope in the darkest places. The October fog rolled across Highway 47 like something alive, thick and white and suffocating. It swallowed the yellow lines, the bare trees, even the memory of where the sky was supposed to be. Eli Porter walked with his head down, hands shoved deep in the pockets of a canvas jacket that had seen better decades, his breath visible in small clouds that disappeared into the greater gray. His steel-toed boots crunched on gravel, the only sound in a world gone silent. It was 6:47 in the morning, and he was already late. The contracting job in Millerton was supposed to start at 7, and the foreman, a red-faced man named Duckett, who didn't tolerate excuses, had made it clear that latecomers could keep walking. Eli couldn't afford to keep walking. Not with Lily's school supplies still unpaid, not with the propane tank sitting at 15%, not with the stack of past due notices sitting on the kitchen counter like a deck of cards he'd already lost with. His truck had died 2 days ago. Transmission, probably. He didn't have the money to find out for sure. So he walked. 3 miles from the farmhouse to the highway, another 4 to the job site. 7 miles in fog so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead. But 7 miles was nothing. He'd walked farther for less. A man did what he had to do when the world stopped offering choices. Eli was 34 years old, though he looked older. Grief had a way of carving years into a face. His hair was dark and too long, curling over his collar, and his jaw was shadowed with stubble he hadn't bothered to shave. His eyes, gray-blue, like winter water, carried the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. He'd been tired for 2 years now, ever since the accident that took Sarah. He didn't let himself think about Sarah in the mornings. Mornings were for moving forward, for putting one foot in front of the other, for surviving. Grief was for the nights, when Lily was asleep and the house was quiet, and the weight of everything he'd lost could press down on him without witness. But the fog had a way of bringing ghosts. He was thinking about Sarah's laugh, the way it used to fill up their little kitchen like sunlight, when he saw the shape in the ditch. At first he thought it was trash. A tarp, maybe, or a bag of old clothes someone had dumped. People did that out here, treated the back roads like their personal landfill. But something about the shape made him slow, made him stop. It was too intentional, too human. Eli squinted through the fog, took 3 steps closer. The shape moved. Jesus, he breathed, and then he was running. She was crumpled at the bottom of the shallow ditch, half hidden by dead leaves and mud. A woman, small and broken, wearing what had once been expensive clothes, now torn and filthy. Her legs were twisted at wrong angles, and one arm was flung out beside her like she'd been reaching for something. Her face was a horror show of bruises, swollen and dark, and there was blood, dried and fresh, matting her black hair to her skull. But her eyes were open. "Oh God," Eli said, dropping to his knees beside her. "Oh God, can you hear me?" The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes, dark brown, almost black, locked onto his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. She was trying to speak, trying so hard. "Don't," Eli said quickly, pulling off his jacket and draping it over her. "Don't try to talk. Just hold on, okay? I'm going to get you help." He fumbled for his phone, already knowing it was useless out here. No signal. There was never a signal on this stretch of highway. The nearest house was 2 miles back, and the nearest payphone, if those even existed anymore, was probably in Millerton. The woman's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Eli froze. "Valeria," she whispered. Her voice was raw, barely audible. "My sister burned." "Your sister?" Eli leaned closer, trying to understand. "Your sister did this?" The woman's eyes fluttered. "Burned. My chair." "Your chair?" Eli looked around, confused, but there was nothing, just mud and leaves and the empty road. "Listen, I don't understand, but we need to get you to a hospital. Can you move? Can you feel your legs? Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't need to answer. Okay, Eli said, his mind racing. Okay. It's okay. I'm going to carry you, all right? It's going to hurt, but I can't leave you here. Do you understand? She nodded, just barely. Eli had carried plenty of heavy things in his life, lumber, drywall, his daughter when she fell asleep in the truck. But he'd never carried a person who couldn't help him, couldn't hold on, couldn't do anything but trust him not to let go. He slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her shoulders, lifting slowly, carefully. She was lighter than he expected, like the trauma had hollowed her out. She made a sound, half gasp, half sob, and he froze. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. Go, she whispered. So he went. Bah. The fog pressed in from all sides as Eli carried her back toward his farmhouse, every step a small eternity. His arms burned within the first quarter mile. By the second mile, his shoulders were screaming. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The woman's breathing was shallow and rapid against his chest, and every few minutes she'd make a small sound, pain or fear. He couldn't tell. And he'd murmur something useless like, almost there, or, you're doing great, because what else could he say? Her head lolled against his shoulder, and once she whispered, Why? Why what? Eli asked, breathing hard. Why? Help! Because you need help, Eli said simply. And I'm here. She didn't respond, but her hand, hanging limp at her side, twitched like she wanted to reach for him and couldn't. The farmhouse appeared through the fog like a mirage, its sagging porch and peeling paint somehow beautiful in that moment. Eli's legs were shaking as he climbed the 3 steps, shouldered open the door, and carried the woman into the living room. Lily, he called. Lily, baby, I need you. His daughter appeared in the hallway, barefoot in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She was 6 years old, with Sarah's dark curls and Eli's serious eyes. When she saw the woman in her father's arms, she went very still. Daddy? It's okay, sweetheart, Eli said, laying the woman as gently as he could on their worn couch. But I need you to do something very important. Can you do that? Lily nodded, her rabbit pressed to her chest. I need you to run to Mrs. Chen's house. You know, the yellow one down the road? I need you to tell her to call 911. Tell her your daddy found a hurt lady, and we need an ambulance right away. Can you remember that? Ambulance, Lily repeated. Right away. Good girl. Go fast, okay? And stay on the road. Lily ran, her small feet slapping against the wooden floor, and then she was gone, the front door banging behind her. Eli turned back to the woman on his couch. She was staring at him again, those dark eyes full of something he couldn't name. Help's coming, he said, grabbing a blanket from the chair and tucking it around her. You're safe now. I promise. My sister, she whispered again, and this time there was something else in her voice. Not fear, anger. Valeria, your sister's name is Valeria? The woman's eyes closed. I'm Valeria, Eli frowned. Okay, Valeria. That's your name? Tried. Kill me. The words landed like stones. Eli rocked back on his heels, staring at this broken woman who'd been left in a ditch like garbage. Someone had tried to kill her. Not an accident, not a hit and run. Murder. Who? He asked quietly. Who tried to kill you? But Valeria had slipped into unconsciousness, her breathing shallow but steady. Eli sat on the floor beside the couch and waited. The ambulance arrived 23 minutes later, its siren cutting through the fog like a knife. 2 paramedics, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a young woman with efficient hands, rushed in and took over with the smooth competence of people who'd seen worse. Possible spinal injury, the woman said, checking Valeria's pupils with a penlight. Severe trauma to the head and face, multiple contusions. We need to stabilize her before we move her. Where did you find her? The man asked Eli. Ditch on Highway 47 about 3 miles east. She was conscious when I found her. Said her name was Valeria. Said something about her sister trying to kill her. The paramedics exchanged a look. Did she say anything else? The woman asked. Something about burning her chair. I don't know what that means. The man stood, pulling out a radio. We need to notify the police. This is a crime scene. Lily appeared in the doorway, holding Mrs. Chen's hand. The elderly woman's face was creased with worry. Eli, what happened? I found her on the road, Eli said. She's hurt bad. Mrs. Chen looked at Valeria's battered face and crossed herself. Ay, Dios mío, who would do such a thing? We're taking her to St. Catherine's, the male paramedic said, as he and his partner carefully transferred Valeria onto a backboard. You should come with us. Police are going to want to talk to you. Eli nodded. He looked at Lily. Can you stay with Mrs. Chen for a bit, sweetheart? I want to come with you, Lily said, her voice small. I know, baby, but please, Daddy. I want to make sure the lady's okay. Eli looked at Mrs. Chen, who squeezed Lily's hand and nodded. I'll bring her, the older woman said. You go. Do what you need to do. As the paramedics loaded Valeria into the ambulance, Eli climbed in beside her. She was intubated now, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, and her face looked even worse under the harsh fluorescent lights. But she was alive. He'd gotten to her in time. The ambulance doors slammed shut and they were moving, the siren wailing as they raced through the fog toward St. Catherine's Hospital. Eli held on to the rail beside the gurney and prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Let her make it. Please, let her make it. St. Catherine's Hospital was a sprawling complex of white buildings and glass windows, the kind of place that probably cost a fortune just to walk into. Eli had been here once before, 2 years ago, when they brought Sarah in after the accident. He'd sat in a waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and despair, while doctors used words like catastrophic and unsurvivable. And when they finally let him see her, she was already gone. He didn't want to be here again. But here he was, following the gurney through automatic doors and fluorescent hallways, past nurses in scrubs and doctors with clipboards, until they pushed through another set of doors marked emergency, and he was told, politely but firmly, that he couldn't go any farther. Family only, the nurse said. I'm not family, Eli admitted. I found her. Then you'll need to wait here. Someone will come talk to you. So he waited. The emergency room waiting area was exactly what he remembered. Too bright, too loud, too full of people in various states of crisis. A man with a bloody towel wrapped around his hand sat in one corner. A young mother paced with a crying baby. An elderly couple held hands in silence, their faces drawn with worry. Eli found a chair near the window and sat down. His arms ached. His back ached. He realized he was still wearing his work boots, now crusted with mud from the ditch, and his jeans were filthy. He looked like exactly what he was, a broke carpenter who'd walked 7 miles in the fog and carried a dying woman 3 miles back. He put his head in his hands and tried not to think about how he'd just missed a day of work he desperately needed. Mr. Porter? Eli looked up. A man in a gray suit stood in front of him holding a badge. He was in his 40s with a lined face and suspicious eyes. A detective, Eli realized with a sinking feeling. I'm Detective Ramos, the man said. I need to ask you some questions about the woman you found. Is she okay? Eli asked, standing. She's in surgery. That's all I know right now. Can you tell me exactly what happened this morning? So Eli told him. All of it. The walk to Millerton, the fog, the shape in the ditch. Valeria's broken body and whispered words about her sister, carrying her home, calling for help. He left nothing out, and Detective Ramos wrote it all down in a small notebook, his expression giving away nothing. She said her sister tried to kill her? Ramos asked. That's what it sounded like. She said, my sister, and something about burning her chair. I didn't understand that part. Ramos tapped his pen against the notebook. Did she say anything else? A name, a location? Just that her name was Valeria. That's all she said before she passed out. And you'd never seen her before? Never. Ramos studied him for a long moment, and Eli had the uncomfortable feeling of being evaluated, measured, judged. Finally, the detective nodded. All right, we're going to need a formal statement, but that can wait. Where can I reach you? Eli gave him his address and the number for Mrs. Chen's landline since he didn't have a working phone. Ramos handed him a card. If you remember anything else, call me. Anytime. Will you tell me? Eli asked. When you find out who did this to her? I can't discuss an ongoing investigation, Ramos said, but then his expression softened slightly. But you saved her life, Mr. Porter. That matters. I'll make sure you're kept informed. After the detective left, Eli sat back down and stared at the card in his hand. Detective Marco Ramos, Millerton County Sheriff's Department. The weight of the morning, the shock, the adrenaline, the exhaustion, settled over him like a heavy blanket. He'd found a woman in a ditch. He'd saved her life. And now he was caught up in something that felt too big, too dark, too far beyond his small, struggling existence. The automatic doors hissed open, and Mrs. Chen appeared with Lily. His daughter ran to him, and he caught her, pulling her into his lap. "Is the lady okay?" Lily whispered. "I don't know yet, baby. The doctors are helping her." "I brought my rabbit," Lily said, holding up the stuffed animal. "For when she wakes up, so she won't be scared." Eli's throat tightened. He kissed the top of Lily's head. "That's real sweet, Lily." They waited together, the three of them, as morning turned to afternoon, and the fog outside finally began to lift. Eli dozed in the uncomfortable chair, Lily curled against his chest, Mrs. Chen knitting in the seat beside them. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. The man with the bloody hand was called back. The young mother stopped pacing. And then, finally, a doctor appeared. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that had seen too much. "Are you the man who found Valeria Cross?" she asked. "Yes," Eli said, standing carefully so he wouldn't wake Lily. "Is she—" "She's alive," the doctor said. "But it's going to be a long road. She has 4 broken ribs, a fractured skull, severe internal bleeding that we had to repair, and—" She paused. "Her spine was injured. We won't know the full extent until the swelling goes down, but right now she has no movement or sensation below the waist." Eli felt the words like a punch. "She's paralyzed. We're hopeful that some function may return with time and therapy, but yes, for now, she's paralyzed." "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "She's not conscious, and you're not family." "I know I'm not family," Eli said quietly. "But she was alone in that ditch. Whoever did this to her left her to die. I just want her to know someone's here, that she's not alone." The doctor studied him for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. She's in ICU, room 12. Valeria Cross looked smaller than she had in the ditch, if that was possible. She was hooked up to more machines than Eli could count. Monitors that beeped, tubes that dripped, wires that connected her to things he didn't understand. Her face was cleaned up now, the blood washed away, but the bruises were even more vivid under the harsh lights. Purple and black and yellow, blooming across her skin like terrible flowers. Eli stood in the doorway, uncertain. He'd carried this woman 3 miles, held her life in his arms, but he didn't know her. Didn't know if she'd even want him here. But he'd made a promise. "You're safe now." He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Lily's stuffed rabbit was still tucked under his arm, and he set it carefully on the table beside Valeria's head, where she'd see it when she woke up. "Hey," he said quietly. "I don't know if you can hear me, but you made it. You're at St. Catherine's Hospital, and the doctors say you're going to be okay. Well, mostly okay. There's some hard stuff ahead, but—" He paused, not sure what to say. "But you're not alone. I'm here. And I'm going to make sure you're safe until whoever did this to you is caught." Valeria didn't move, didn't respond. The machines kept beeping their steady rhythm. Eli sat there for the full 5 minutes, and when a nurse came to tell him time was up, he stood slowly. "I'll come back," he told Valeria's sleeping form. "I promise." Outside in the hall, Detective Ramos was waiting. "Mr. Porter," the detective said, "we need to talk, now." Eli's stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong," Ramos said, "is that the woman you found isn't just anyone. She's Valeria Cross, CEO of Crosstech Industries, worth about $3 billion, and she's been missing for 2 days. The hallway seemed to tilt. Eli grabbed the wall to steady himself. "What?" "Valeria Cross," Ramos repeated, "one of the richest women in the country. Her face has been all over the news since Wednesday. Her family reported her missing after she didn't show up for a board meeting. They thought she'd been kidnapped. We thought—" He shook his head. "We thought we'd be finding a body." I don't understand," Eli said. "Why would someone—" "That's what we're going to find out," Ramos said grimly. "But right now, Mr. Porter, you're the only witness we have, and you might be the only reason Valeria Cross is still alive." Eli looked back at the closed door of room 12, where a billionaire CEO he'd never heard of lay broken and fighting for her life, and realized that nothing about his life would ever be simple again. The fog had lifted, but the storm was just beginning. By the time Eli made it back to the farmhouse, it was nearly dark. Mrs. Chen had taken Lily home hours ago, promising soup and cartoons and a sleepover if needed. Eli was grateful. He needed time to think, to process, to figure out what the hell he'd stumbled into. $3 billion. He couldn't even imagine that much money. It was an abstract concept like infinity or the distance to the moon, and yet the woman who possessed it had been thrown in a ditch like trash, beaten and broken and left to die. Her sister, she'd said. Her sister had tried to kill her. Eli unlocked the farmhouse door and stepped into the dark, quiet space. Everything looked the same. The worn couch where he'd laid Valeria, the blanket he'd covered her with, still crumpled on the floor. The kitchen with its chipped counters and ancient refrigerator. The living room with its sagging bookshelves and pictures of Sarah. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He heated up some canned soup, tomato, because that's what they had, and ate it standing at the sink, staring out at the dark fields beyond the house. Somewhere out there, in the fog and the night, someone had tried to commit murder. And they'd failed because Eli Porter, broke carpenter and single dad, had happened to be walking to work at the exact right moment. What were the odds? He thought about Valeria's eyes in that ditch, dark and desperate and trying so hard to stay open. He thought about the weight of her in his arms, the way she'd whispered, "Why?" like she couldn't understand why anyone would help her. He thought about the machines in the ICU, keeping her alive, and the long road ahead that the doctor had mentioned. Paralyzed. Eli washed his bowl and set it in the rack to dry. Then he walked to the living room and looked at the picture of Sarah on the mantel, her bright smile, her wild curls, her hand on her pregnant belly. Lily had been born 3 months after that photo was taken. Sarah had lived for 6 more years after that, 6 years of laughter and love and ordinary happiness before a drunk driver ran a red light and took her away. "I met someone today," Eli said to the photograph. "Well, met isn't the right word. I found someone, and I think maybe I was supposed to find her. Maybe that's why the truck broke down. Maybe that's why I had to walk, so I'd be there, right when she needed someone." The picture didn't answer. It never did. "I'm going to help her," Eli continued. "I don't know how yet, but she doesn't have anybody, and I know what that's like." He stood there for a long moment, looking at his wife's face, feeling the familiar ache of her absence. Then he turned off the lights and went upstairs to bed. Tomorrow, he'd go back to the hospital. Tomorrow, he'd figure out what came next. Tonight, he'd just be grateful that a woman named Valeria Cross was still breathing, because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the money, not the mystery, not the danger that was surely coming. Just one life saved. Sometimes that was enough. The morning light came pale and cold through the hospital windows, casting long shadows across the ICU hallway, where Eli stood with a cup of terrible coffee and a knot of worry in his chest. He'd been back at St. Catherine's since 6 a.m., after dropping Lily at school with promises that yes, he'd check on the hurt lady, and yes, he'd bring back news. Detective Ramos had called the farmhouse at dawn, his voice tight with urgency. "We need you at the hospital, Porter. Valeria's awake, and she's asking for you." Now Eli waited outside room 12, watching through the glass as doctors moved around Valeria's bed, checking monitors and making notes on clipboards. She was propped up slightly, her dark hair matted against the white pillow, her face still a canvas of bruises, but her eyes were open, alert, alive. A nurse emerged, a young woman with kind eyes and purple scrubs. "You can go in now," she said, "but keep it brief. She's still very weak." Eli's hands were shaking as he pushed open the door. He didn't know why he was nervous. He'd already saved this woman's life, already carried her broken body through miles of fog. But that had been instinct, survival, the simple human act of helping someone in need. This was different. This was facing the person he'd saved, the billionaire CEO whose world he couldn't begin to understand, and having to find words that wouldn't sound foolish or small. Valeria's eyes found him immediately. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, this woman who'd been left for dead and this man who'd refused to leave her there. "You," she whispered. Her voice was raw, damaged, but there was strength underneath. "You're real. I thought maybe I dreamed you." Eli moved closer to the bed, his work boots loud on the tile floor. "I'm real. Name's Eli Porter." "Eli," she repeated, like she was testing the weight of it. "You carried me. I remember your voice in the fog. You kept talking to me." "Didn't know what else to do," Eli said, feeling heat rise in his face. "Seemed like you needed to hear someone." Valeria's eyes filled with tears. "You saved my life. I was there. Anyone would have—" "No." Her voice was suddenly fierce despite its weakness. "No, not anyone. Someone put me in that ditch, Eli. Someone left me there to die. And everyone who was supposed to protect me, everyone who was supposed to care, they let it happen." A tear slid down her bruised cheek. "But you, a stranger, you carried me out of hell." Eli didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He just pulled the chair closer and sat down, the same chair he'd occupied yesterday, and waited. "The doctors told me," Valeria continued after a moment, "about my legs, about the paralysis. They said there might be improvement with therapy. I know what they said." Her jaw tightened. "I also know what they didn't say, that I might never walk again, that everything I was, everything I built, might be gone." "You're still here?" Eli said quietly. "That's what matters." Valeria laughed, a bitter sound. "Is it? I'm the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, Eli. Or I was. My stepsister Camille tried to have me killed because I wouldn't sell Crosstech to her investors. She burned my wheelchair. That's what I was trying to tell you in the ditch. I use a wheelchair sometimes for my chronic pain condition. She burned it in front of me before they—" Her voice broke. "Before they beat me and threw me away." The casual cruelty of it hit Eli like a fist. "Your own sister did this?" "Stepsister," Valeria corrected. "And yes, with help from 3 board members who wanted me gone. They all thought I was too difficult, too stubborn, too unwilling to compromise my vision for their profits." She looked at him with those dark eyes that had haunted his dreams. "They were right. I am stubborn, and now I'm paying for it." The door opened before Eli could respond. Detective Ramos entered, followed by a woman in an expensive gray suit. A lawyer, Eli guessed from the briefcase and the aura of controlled authority she carried like a weapon. "Ms. Cross," Ramos said, "this is Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh. She needs to take your statement." Valeria's expression hardened. "Then she'll need to make it quick. I'm tired." Walsh stepped forward, all business. "Ms. Cross, we understand you've been through a trauma, but time is critical. Your stepsister, Camille Cross, has been located at your Manhattan penthouse. We need your statement to obtain an arrest warrant." "You have my statement," Valeria said coldly. "Camille Cross, Richard Voss, Patricia Chen, and David Mercer conspired to have me killed. They lured me to the executive cabin under pretense of an emergency meeting, then beat me, destroyed my wheelchair, and left me in a ditch on Highway 47. Is that clear enough for your warrant?" Walsh's pen moved rapidly across her legal pad. "We'll need more details, the timeline, specific threats made, any evidence of premeditation." "I'll give you everything," Valeria interrupted, "but not now, and not without Mr. Porter present." All eyes turned to Eli, who felt like he'd been dropped into the wrong movie. "Me? Why?" "Because you're the only person in this room I trust," Valeria said simply. "Everyone else wants something from me. My money, my company, my testimony. You just wanted to make sure I didn't die alone in the fog." She looked at Walsh. "So yes, I'll give you your statement, with Eli Porter as my witness. Those are my terms." Walsh glanced at Ramos, who shrugged. Your call, counselor. Fine, Walsh said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. We'll reconvene this afternoon, 2 o'clock. Mr. Porter, make sure you're here. After they left, Valeria sagged back against the pillows, exhausted. I'm sorry, she said to Eli. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. You've already done so much. It's okay, Eli said, though he wasn't sure it was. If you need me there, I'll be there. I do need you, Valeria said, so quietly he almost missed it. That's the strangest part of all this. I have lawyers, accountants, security teams, an entire infrastructure designed to protect me, and yet the person I need most is a carpenter who found me in a ditch. Before Eli could respond, the door burst open and a small whirlwind in pink sneakers came racing through. Lily, with Mrs. Chen puffing behind her, holding a plastic bag from the hospital gift shop. Lily! Eli stood quickly. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at school. Half day, Mrs. Chen explained, catching her breath. Teacher training. I told Lily we could visit her new friend. She held up the bag. We brought gifts. Lily approached the bed with none of her father's hesitation, her dark eyes solemn as she studied Valeria's bruised face. Does it hurt? She asked. Valeria blinked, clearly caught off guard. Yes, she said honestly. It hurts quite a bit. Daddy says when something hurts, you gotta be brave, Lily said, and you gotta have something to make you smile. She reached into the bag and pulled out a small stuffed bear wearing a t-shirt that said, Get well soon. This is for you. His name is Mr. Pickles. A strange expression crossed Valeria's face, something between a laugh and a sob. Mr. Pickles. I wanted to name him Mr. Carrots, but Mrs. Chen said that's a name for a rabbit, not a bear. Lily set the bear carefully on the table next to the stuffed rabbit from yesterday. Now you have 2 friends, so you won't be lonely. Valeria reached out with trembling fingers and touched the bear's fuzzy head. When she looked up at Lily, tears were streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Lily frowned. Why are you crying? Don't you like Mr. Pickles? I love Mr. Pickles, Valeria said, and this time she did laugh, a real sound that seemed to surprise even her. I'm crying because I'm happy, because you're very kind. Daddy says we should always be kind, Lily said matter-of-factly, especially to people who are hurt. That's what Mommy would have wanted. The simple innocence of it, the absolute clarity of a 6-year-old's moral universe, seemed to undo something in Valeria. She covered her face with her hands and wept, her shoulders shaking with the force of emotions too long contained. Eli moved to collect Lily, to give Valeria privacy, but his daughter was faster. She climbed carefully onto the chair and reached through the bed rails to pat Valeria's arm with small, gentle hands. It's okay, Lily said softly. It's okay to cry. Daddy cries sometimes too, when he thinks I'm asleep. But then he gets up and makes pancakes, and pancakes make everything better. Valeria lowered her hands and looked at this child who had no reason to care about her, no obligation to offer comfort, yet did so with the unselfconscious grace that only children possess. Does your daddy make good pancakes? The best, Lily said solemnly, with chocolate chips. That does sound good, Valeria said, wiping her eyes. Maybe someday I'll get to try them. You can come to our house, Lily said excitedly. When you're better, Daddy can make you pancakes and show you my room and you can meet all my stuffed animals. I have 17. Lily, Eli said gently. Miss Cross is very busy. She has a big company to run. Actually, Valeria said, I would love to meet all 17 stuffed animals. If the invitation stands. Lily beamed. It stands! Doesn't it, Daddy? Eli met Valeria's eyes over his daughter's head and saw something there that made his chest tight. A loneliness that matched his own, a hunger for the simple human connection that money couldn't buy. Yeah, he said. It stands. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. We should let Ms. Cross rest. Come, Lily, we'll go get some lunch and come back later. Can I read to her first? Lily asked, like I did for Mommy in the hospital before... The unfinished sentence hung in the air. Eli's throat closed. He'd forgotten that Lily remembered that, those last days when Sarah was unconscious and Lily had insisted on reading her favorite stories aloud, believing somehow that her mother could still hear. "I would love that," Valeria said, her voice thick. "What book did you bring?" Lily pulled a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are from her backpack. "It's my favorite. Mommy used to read it to me every night." So Lily read, her small voice careful with each word, and Valeria listened with an attention that suggested this was the most important thing in the world. Eli stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot and trying to understand how his life had become this. Standing in a hospital room while his daughter read to a billionaire, both of them connected by trauma and loss and the strange mercy of chance. When Lily finished, she closed the book with satisfaction. "The end. Did you like it?" "I loved it," Valeria said. "Will you come back and read to me again?" "Every day," Lily promised, "until you're all better." After Mrs. Chen took Lily for lunch, Eli started to follow, but Valeria stopped him. "Wait. Please, just stay a little longer." He stayed. They sat in silence for a while, the machines beeping their steady rhythm, the hospital sounds filtering through the door, intercoms, footsteps, distant conversations. Finally, Valeria spoke. "I built Crosstech from nothing," she said, staring at the ceiling. "My father started it, yes, but it was a small manufacturing company when I took over at 25. I made it what it is, a technology empire. 15,000 employees, operations in 32 countries, $3 billion in annual revenue." She paused. "And my stepsister tried to take it all away because I wouldn't make her rich fast enough." "The police will get her," Eli said. "She'll pay for what she did." "Will she?" Valeria's laugh was bitter. "Camille has lawyers, Eli. The best lawyers money can buy. She'll claim she had nothing to do with it, that she was at home, that I'm confused from the head injury. And the board members who helped her? They'll have alibis, stories, reasonable doubt." She turned her head to look at him. "I know how this works. I've been in boardrooms full of sharks my whole life. I know how to recognize when someone's circling." "Then what are you going to do?" "Fight," Valeria said simply. "Because that's what I do. I fight and I win, and I don't let bastards who tried to kill me take my company." Her eyes blazed with sudden intensity. "But I can't do it alone, not anymore. I need people I can trust. People who don't want anything from me except maybe chocolate chip pancakes and stuffed animal introductions." Eli felt the weight of what she was asking, or not asking, not yet, but leading toward. "I'm not a businessman, Valeria. I'm a carpenter. I barely finished high school. I don't know anything about your world." "You know how to carry someone through the fog when everyone else leaves them to die," Valeria said. "That's the only qualification that matters right now." Before Eli could respond, Detective Ramos returned, his expression grave. "Ms. Cross, we have a problem. Camille Cross has filed a missing person report for you, dated 2 days before you disappeared. She's claiming she was worried about your mental state, that you'd been behaving erratically. She's got witnesses, documentation, everything." Valeria's face went white. "She's trying to say I'm incompetent, that I can't run the company." "Worse," Ramos said. "She's got a board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Emergency vote on your removal as CEO due to incapacity. If that vote passes..." He didn't need to finish. "They'll take everything," Valeria whispered. "Even if we prove she tried to kill me, even if she goes to prison, they'll still take my company." Eli watched the devastation wash over her face and felt something fierce rise in his chest. This woman had been beaten, paralyzed, left for dead, and still they were trying to destroy her. Still her own family was reaching for power over her hospital bed. "No," he said. Both Valeria and Ramos looked at him. "No," Eli repeated, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. "They don't get to do this. We don't let them." "Eli," Valeria said gently, "you don't understand. I understand plenty." Eli interrupted. "I understand that people with money think they can do whatever they want. I understand that you're lying in that bed because your sister valued dollars over your life. I understand that if we let them vote you out tomorrow, everything you built disappears and they win." He leaned forward. "But I also understand that you're alive. You're still here, still breathing, still able to fight. So we fight." "How?" Valeria asked, and there was desperate hope in the word. "I can't even get out of this bed. How am I supposed to stop a board meeting?" Ramos cleared his throat. Actually, Ms. Cross, you don't need to be physically present. Crosstech bylaws allow for remote attendance at board meetings. You just need a secure connection and I need to look like I'm not dying, Valeria finished. I need to look strong, capable, in control. She touched her bruised face. Look at me. I look like exactly what I am, a victim. Then we make you look like a survivor, Eli said. Over the next hour, they planned. Ramos would arrange for secure video conferencing equipment. Valeria's personal assistant, a fierce woman named Margaret, who'd been frantically searching for her boss, would bring clothes, makeup, anything needed to make Valeria look presentable on camera. The hospital would provide a private room for the meeting, away from the medical equipment and sterile surroundings that would broadcast her vulnerability. I'll need my files, Valeria said, her mind already working through strategy. All the documentation on the development projects Camille wanted me to kill. The safety reports, the environmental impact studies, everything they wanted to bury for profit. If I'm going into that boardroom, I'm going in armed. Margaret's bringing everything, Ramos assured her. She's been at your office all night gathering evidence. Valeria nodded, then turned to Eli. I need you there, in the room, off camera, but there. Valeria, I don't know anything about corporate. I don't need you to know about corporate anything, she said. I need you to remind me why I'm fighting. Because tomorrow, when I'm facing those board members who tried to destroy me, when I'm looking at my stepsister's face on that screen, knowing she ordered me beaten and left to die, I'm going to want to quit. I'm going to want to let them win and just disappear. But if you're there, if I can see you... She paused, her voice dropping. If I can see the man who carried me out of hell, maybe I'll remember that I'm stronger than they think. How could he say no to that? I'll be there, Eli promised. That afternoon, at exactly 2 o'clock, Eli sat in a private conference room while ADA Walsh took Valeria's statement. The details were horrific. The fake emergency that lured Valeria to the remote cabin the moment she realized she'd been betrayed. The methodical brutality of the attack. 3 men, she said. Their faces covered, their identities unknown, but following Camille's orders. She watched, Valeria said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. My stepsister stood there and watched them beat me. And when I asked why, she said, because you wouldn't get out of the way. Walsh's pen moved across paper, recording every word. And after the assault? They loaded me into a vehicle, a van, I think. Drove for maybe 30 minutes. Then they pulled me out and threw me into the ditch. Camille leaned over me and said, Don't worry, Val. I'll take good care of Crosstech for you. Then they left. I heard the van drive away and Valeria's composure cracked. And I thought I was going to die there. I thought no one would find me in time. Eli reached over and took her hand. She gripped it like a lifeline. But someone did, Walsh said quietly. Mr. Porter, can you describe the condition Miss Cross was in when you found her? So Eli told his part. The fog, the ditch, the broken woman who'd whispered about her sister. He described carrying Valeria 3 miles, the weight of her in his arms, the fear that she wouldn't make it. As he spoke, he saw Walsh's professional mask slip slightly, saw the flicker of human emotion beneath the prosecutor's armor. That's enough for the warrant, Walsh said finally. Ms. Cross, thank you for your courage in coming forward. We'll have Camille Cross and the 3 board members in custody by morning. Make sure it's before the board meeting, Valeria said. I want them to know they failed. I want them to see me alive and fighting. After Walsh left, Valeria sagged back in her wheelchair. A new one, borrowed from the hospital. The statement had taken everything she had. Eli could see exhaustion written in every line of her body. Let me take you back to your room, he said gently. Not yet. Valeria looked up at him. Tell me about your wife. Lily mentioned her, and I saw... She gestured to his left hand, to the worn gold band he still wore. You're grieving. I can see it, just like I can see that you're holding it together for your daughter. Eli sat down heavily in the chair across from her. No one had asked about Sarah in a long time. Most people didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. The silence had become its own kind of burden. Sarah died 2 years ago, he said. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light, hit her on the driver's side. She didn't... It was instant. That's what they told me. that she didn't suffer. He twisted the ring on his finger. Lily was 4, old enough to understand Mommy wasn't coming home, but not old enough to understand why. "I'm so sorry," Valeria said, and the sympathy in her voice was genuine, untainted by pity. "The insurance money ran out fast," Eli continued. "Medical bills from the pregnancy, Lily was premature, spent weeks in ICU, the funeral, the debts Sarah and I had been carrying, and then it was just me and Lily and a farmhouse that's falling apart and never enough money to fix anything." He looked up at her. "That's why I was walking to Millerton yesterday. My truck died and I can't afford to fix it, but I had a contracting job that might have paid enough to keep the lights on another month. Instead, I found you." "And missed the job," Valeria said. "Yeah." "How much was it going to pay?" Eli shook his head. "Doesn't matter now." "It matters to me." "How much?" $200 for the day, maybe more if the job ran long. Valeria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to hire you." "Hire me? For what?" "For whatever needs doing. Carpentry, repairs, renovations. I have properties that need work. Real work, Eli, not charity. I'll pay you a fair wage, better than fair, and you'll have steady income." She held up a hand before he could protest. "I know what you're thinking, that this is payment for saving my life, that I'm trying to be noble. But that's not it. I need people around me I can trust. People who see me as Valeria, not as a billion-dollar asset. You've already proven you're that person. So let me hire you, not as thanks, but as investment in the thing I need most right now, loyalty." Eli wanted to say no, wanted to refuse on principle, to maintain his independence, to not become one more person on Valeria Cross's payroll. But he thought about Lily, about the school supplies and the propane tank and the mortgage payments he'd been juggling like grenades. He thought about dignity and pride and how neither of those things kept a 6-year-old warm in winter. "Okay," he said, "but we do it right. Contract, payment schedule, expectations. I work for what I earn." "Deal." Valeria extended her hand and they shook on it, a carpenter and a CEO, bound together by fog and chance and the strange alchemy of survival. That evening, Eli returned to the farmhouse to find Mrs. Chen's car still in the driveway and the smell of something delicious wafting from the kitchen. He found his daughter at the table, carefully coloring a picture of a bear in a hospital bed. "It's for Ms. Valeria," Lily explained, "so she knows Mr. Pickles is taking good care of her." Mrs. Chen emerged from the kitchen with a steaming pot of pho. "You look exhausted, mijo. Sit. Eat. Tell me what's happening." So while Lily colored, Eli told Mrs. Chen about the board meeting, the arrest warrants, Valeria's determination to fight. The older woman listened, stirring her soup, nodding occasionally. "This woman," she said finally, "she is special to you already, yes?" Eli started to deny it, then stopped. "I don't know. Maybe. She's fighting so hard, Mrs. Chen, against people who want to destroy her, and she's doing it from a hospital bed with a broken body. I can't help but admire that." "And she reminds you that there are still things worth fighting for," Mrs. Chen said gently, "because you have been just surviving, Eli, since Sarah died. You take care of Lily, you work when you can find work, you put one foot in front of the other, but you don't fight, you don't hope." The truth of it hit him hard. She was right. He'd been treading water for 2 years, too afraid to drown to consider actually swimming. "Maybe," he said quietly. That night, after Lily was asleep, Eli stood in the doorway of her room and watched her breathe, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. He thought about tomorrow, about Valeria facing down the people who'd tried to kill her, about justice and revenge and the thin line between them. He thought about second chances and whether he believed in them, whether he deserved them. His phone rang. Mrs. Chen's landline, the number only a few people had. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Porter?" It was Margaret, Valeria's assistant. "Ms. Cross asked me to call. The board meeting is at 9 a.m. Can you be here by 8:30? "I'll be there." "Good." "And Mr. Porter?" She's scared. She won't admit it, but I've worked for Valeria Cross for 10 years, and I've never seen her scared. Whatever you said to her today, whatever strength you gave her, she's going to need it tomorrow. All of it." After hanging up, Eli walked to the window and looked out at the dark fields. Somewhere out there, in the expensive corners of the city, Camille Cross was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed lies were about to collapse. Somewhere, in a hospital room, Valeria was lying awake, preparing for war. And here, in a falling-down farmhouse, with peeling paint and a broken truck, Eli Porter was making a choice. Not just to show up tomorrow, not just to be present, but to fight. For the first time in 2 years, he was choosing to fight. He pulled on his jacket and walked out into the October night, letting the cold air fill his lungs. The fog had lifted days ago, but he could still remember it, the way it had pressed in from all sides, the way it had hidden a dying woman in a ditch, the way it had changed everything. Tomorrow, Valeria would face her demons, and he would be there, a carpenter in a boardroom, completely out of his depth and absolutely certain that this was where he needed to be. Because sometimes survival wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to stand up and declare that you were done being a victim, done being afraid, done letting the bastards win. Tomorrow, they would fight, and tomorrow, they would win. Eli arrived at St. Catherine's at 8:15 the next morning, wearing the only suit he owned, a navy blue number he'd bought for Sarah's funeral and hadn't touched since. It didn't fit quite right anymore. He'd lost weight in the past 2 years, and the shoulders hung a bit loose. But it was clean and pressed, thanks to Mrs. Chen's iron and her insistence that if he was going to stand beside a billionaire, he should at least look respectable. Margaret met him in the lobby, a slim woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked him up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who'd spent a decade protecting Valeria from threats both obvious and subtle. "You're the carpenter," she said. It wasn't a question. "Eli Porter, ma'am." "Margaret Winters, follow me." She set off at a brisk pace, and Eli hurried to keep up. The conference room is set up on the 3rd floor. Secure connection, cameras positioned to hide the medical equipment, lighting adjusted to minimize the bruising on her face. We've done everything we can to make her look strong. "How is she?" Eli asked. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Terrified, furious, determined, all at once. She's been up since 5 reviewing files and preparing her statement to the board. She glanced at him. "She asked for you 3 times. Whatever you did to earn her trust, Mr. Porter, don't take it lightly. Valeria Cross doesn't trust easily." They rode the elevator in silence, then walked down a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and floor polish. At room 314, Margaret paused with her hand on the door. "One more thing," she said quietly. "When Camille appears on that screen, and she will, because she's arrogant enough to attend even with arrest warrants pending, Valeria is going to want to break. She's going to see the woman who ordered her death, who stood there and watched, and every instinct will tell her to scream or cry or give up. Your job is to keep her anchored, to remind her why she's fighting. Can you do that?" "Yes," Eli said, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. Margaret nodded and opened the door. The conference room had been transformed into something that looked more like a professional office than a hospital space. The medical bed was gone, replaced by a high-backed leather chair positioned behind a mahogany desk. Valeria sat in her wheelchair at the desk, and for a moment Eli barely recognized her. She wore a black suit jacket over a cream blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Makeup covered most of the bruising, though nothing could completely hide the swelling around her left eye or the cut on her lip. But it was her expression that transformed her. Gone was the vulnerable woman from yesterday's hospital bed, replaced by the steel-eyed CEO who'd built an empire. "Eli," she said, and her voice was steady, "thank you for coming." "Wouldn't miss it," he said, moving to stand beside the desk, just out of camera range as they'd planned. A technician was adjusting the camera angle, and another was testing the audio connection. On the large monitor mounted on the wall, Eli could see a feed of an ornate boardroom, all dark wood paneling and leather chairs. 11 seats arranged around a massive table, most of them already occupied. "5 minutes, Ms. Cross," the technician said. Valeria's hands were trembling. She noticed Eli noticing and gave him a rueful smile. "Not quite as confident as I look." "You look like you could buy and sell everyone in that room," Eli said. "I could," Valeria replied, "but that's not enough anymore. They want me gone, and they're willing to destroy everything I've built to make it happen." She took a breath. "Did Ramos call you about the arrests?" He did. Camille and two of the board members were taken into custody at 6 this morning. The third one, David Mercer, is missing. They're still looking. Valeria's jaw tightened. Of course David ran. He was always a coward. She looked up at Eli. But Camille being arrested won't stop this vote. The board has a quorum without her, and the remaining members are loyal to her vision, not mine. They'll still try to remove me. Then you fight harder, Eli said simply. 2 minutes, the technician announced. Margaret appeared at Eli's elbow with a bottle of water and a folder thick with documents. Everything you need is here. The safety reports on the Brazilian facility, the environmental impact studies Camille wanted buried, the emails showing she knew about the violations and ordered you to ignore them. It's all documented. Valeria took the folder with steady hands. If I'm going down, I'm taking them all with me. You're not going down, Eli said quietly. You're walking out of here with your company intact and your head held high. Because that's what survivors do. Valeria looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. Then the technician was counting down and the monitor flickered to life with full clarity. The Crosstech boardroom appeared in sharp detail. 8 people sat around the table, their faces ranging from concerned to openly hostile. At the head of the table, where Valeria's seat normally would be, sat a man in his 60s with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Richard Voss, Eli recognized from the photos Margaret had shown him earlier. Good morning, Valeria, Voss said, his tone dripping with false warmth. We're so relieved to see you alive and well. Cut the bullshit, Richard, Valeria said coldly. We both know you're the one who orchestrated this. You and Camille and Patricia and David. The only question is, which one of you is going to flip first to save your own skin? A ripple of shock went through the board members. A woman in a red suit, Patricia Chen, Eli realized, leaned forward with manufactured concern. Valeria, we understand you've been through a trauma. Perhaps this meeting should be postponed until you're feeling more yourself. I am feeling more myself than I have in months, Valeria shot back. In fact, nearly dying has given me remarkable clarity about who my enemies are. Voss's smile vanished. This kind of paranoid accusation is exactly why we've called this emergency meeting. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, it pains me to say this, but our CEO is clearly suffering from the effects of her recent ordeal and is unfit to lead this company. I have a motion on the floor, another board member chimed in, a younger man with slicked back hair, to remove Valeria Cross as CEO of Crosstech Industries, effective immediately, citing medical incapacity and erratic behavior. I second the motion, Patricia said quickly. Then let's vote, Voss said. All in favor of removing Valeria Cross as CEO. You don't have the votes, Richard, Valeria interrupted. Her voice was calm, but Eli could see her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the desk. According to Crosstech bylaws, any vote to remove a sitting CEO requires a 2/3 majority of the full board. That's 12 votes. You have 11 members present. Even if every single one of you votes against me, which they won't, you don't have quorum. Voss's face darkened. Camille Cross holds the 12th seat as Chief Operating Officer. She's granted her proxy to... Camille Cross is in police custody, Valeria said. Arrested this morning on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. So unless you're planning to take her proxy from a jail cell, Richard, you're out of luck. The boardroom erupted. Board members talked over each other, some demanding explanations, others looking genuinely shocked. Only Voss and Patricia seemed unsurprised by the news, confirming what Eli had suspected. They'd known about Camille's plan all along. Voss slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You're accusing board members of crimes without evidence, disrupting a legitimate meeting with conspiracy theories. I have evidence, Valeria said quietly, and the room went silent. She opened the folder Margaret had given her and held up a document to the camera. This is an internal memo dated October 10th, 5 days before I disappeared. It's from you, Richard, to Camille, discussing permanent solutions to our current leadership problem. Would you like me to read it aloud? Voss's face went pale. That memo was taken out of context. And this, Valeria continued, holding up another document, is an email from Patricia Chen to David Mercer, discussing how my unfortunate absence would allow them to push through the Brazilian facility expansion despite my safety concerns. Concerns that, by the way, were based on engineering reports showing critical structural failures. She looked directly into the camera. You were willing to kill me to build a factory you knew would collapse and kill workers. For profit margins. Patricia stood abruptly. I won't sit here and be slandered. Then leave, Valeria said. In fact, please do leave, because the FBI is currently executing search warrants at your homes and offices, and I imagine you'll want to be present when they find the rest of the evidence linking you to conspiracy and attempted murder. The boardroom dissolved into chaos. 2 members immediately stood and walked out. Others huddled in urgent whispered conversations. Patricia's face had gone from red to ashen, and she stumbled from the room without another word. Only Voss remained seated, his expression cold and calculating. You think you've won, he said softly, but you're broken, Valeria. You're in a wheelchair. You'll probably never walk again, and even if you survive this vote, the shareholders will never trust a CEO who's fighting criminal charges against her own board. I'm not fighting criminal charges, Valeria said. I'm the victim, Richard, and the shareholders will see exactly what you are, a man who tried to murder his CEO for profit. She leaned forward slightly, and Eli saw the steel underneath her composure. But you're right about one thing. I am broken. You and Camille and your hired thugs broke me. You beat me, paralyzed me, and left me in a ditch to die. Her voice dropped. But I survived. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. Voss stood, straightening his tie. We'll see what the courts say about that. And in the meantime, Crosstech will continue under acting leadership. There is no acting leadership, another board member interrupted, an older man Eli hadn't noticed before, with white hair and kind eyes. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Richard Voss as board chairman, effective immediately. All in favor? 5 hands went up. The remaining board members looked stunned. Motion carries, the white-haired man said. Richard, you're removed as chairman pending investigation. This meeting is adjourned until we can convene with proper legal counsel and law enforcement present. The monitor went dark. For a long moment, Valeria just sat there, staring at the blank screen. Then her hands started shaking. Then her shoulders. Then she was sobbing, great wrenching sobs that seemed to tear out of her chest. Eli was beside her in an instant, kneeling next to the wheelchair. Hey, it's okay. You did it. You won. I didn't win anything, Valeria gasped between sobs. They're still out there. Camille and Richard and all of them. They'll get lawyers, they'll fight the charges, and even if they lose, my company is broken. My board is broken. Everything I built is still standing, Eli said firmly. He took her hands, stilling their trembling. Valeria, look at me. Look at me. She did, her eyes red and swimming with tears. You just faced down the people who tried to kill you, Eli said. You looked them in the eye and told them you survived, and you're not backing down. That's not losing, that's winning in the only way that matters. But what if it's not enough, Valeria whispered. What if they find a way to take it all anyway? Then you build something new, Eli said. Because that's what you do. That's who you are. You're the woman who built an empire from nothing. You think a few corrupt board members can stop that? Valeria laughed through her tears, a broken sound. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, Eli said. Not easy, but simple. You stand up, you fight, you keep going. That's all survival is. Margaret appeared with tissues and water, her own eyes suspiciously bright. That was extraordinary, she said quietly. I've been with you for 10 years, Valeria, and I've never seen anything like that. I wanted to quit, Valeria admitted, taking the tissues. Halfway through, when Richard started talking about how I was broken, I wanted to just give up and disappear. But you didn't, Margaret said. Because Eli was there, Valeria said, looking at him. Because I could see him out of the corner of my eye, and I remembered that someone thought I was worth carrying through 3 miles of fog. If I was worth that, then maybe I was worth fighting for too. Eli didn't know what to say to that, so he just squeezed her hand and let her cry until the tears ran out. The rest of the morning was a blur of police interviews, lawyer consultations, and phone calls with shareholders demanding explanations. Margaret handled most of it with ruthless efficiency, but Valeria insisted on taking certain calls herself, the ones from employees worried about their jobs, the ones from partners concerned about the company's stability. She reassured each one with a steadiness that belied her exhaustion, promising that Crosstech would weather this storm. By early afternoon, Eli had to leave to pick up Lily from school. He found Valeria back in her hospital room, staring out the window at the gray November sky. "I have to go get my daughter," he said from the doorway. "But I can come back later if you need—" "Bring her with you," Valeria interrupted. "Please, I could use the company, and—" She smiled slightly. "I promised I'd hear about all 17 stuffed animals." So that evening, Eli returned with Lily, who'd insisted on bringing not only all 17 stuffed animals, but also 3 books, a coloring book, and a bag of cookies Mrs. Chen had baked. They found Valeria sitting up in bed, looking more like herself, the makeup washed off, comfortable clothes replacing the suit, her hair down around her shoulders. "You came!" Valeria's face lit up when she saw Lily. "I brought everybody," Lily announced, dumping her bag of stuffed animals onto the foot of the bed. "This is Mr. Whiskers, and this is Princess Buttercup, and this is Captain Fluffy Pants. He's a pirate, and this is—" While Lily narrated the complex backstories of each stuffed animal, Eli sat in the chair by the window and watched. There was something surreal about it, his 6-year-old daughter sitting on a hospital bed with a billionaire, discussing the relative merits of stuffed rabbits versus stuffed bears with complete seriousness. But there was also something right about it, something that felt like the beginning of something he couldn't quite name. "And this one is Stella," Lily finished, holding up a worn stuffed dog with one ear missing. "She was Mommy's when Mommy was little. Daddy gave her to me after Mommy went to heaven." Valeria reached out and gently touched the stuffed dog's remaining ear. "She's beautiful. I bet your Mommy loved her very much." "Daddy says I have Mommy's smile," Lily said, "and that when I laugh, it sounds just like her. That's good, right? So Daddy doesn't forget what Mommy sounded like?" Eli's throat closed. He hadn't known Lily thought about that, about him forgetting. "That's very good," Valeria said softly. "And I bet your Mommy is very proud of you for being so brave and kind." "Are you going to die too?" Lily asked with the blunt honesty of childhood. "Like my Mommy did?" "Lily," Eli said sharply, standing. "That's not—" "It's okay," Valeria said, holding up a hand. She looked at Lily seriously. "No, sweetheart, I'm not going to die. I was hurt very badly, and it's going to take a long time to get better, but I'm going to be okay. Promise?" "I promise." "Okay." Lily seemed satisfied with this. She picked up one of her books, Where the Wild Things Are, again, and settled next to Valeria. "Want me to read to you? It helps when people are sad." "I would love that," Valeria said. So Lily read, her small voice careful and proud, and Valeria listened with an attention that suggested this was the most important board meeting she'd attended all day. Eli watched them both and felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the grief he'd been carrying, a space opening up for something new. After Lily finished and they'd said their goodbyes, Eli lingered in the doorway while Lily went to find a vending machine with Margaret. "Thank you," Valeria said, "for bringing her, for being here, for—" She paused. "For making me feel like maybe I can survive this." "You can," Eli said. "You already are." "The doctors want to discharge me in a few days," Valeria said. "They say I'm stable enough for outpatient therapy, but I can't go home. My apartment is still a crime scene, and even if it wasn't, it's not accessible, not for someone in a wheelchair." Eli saw where this was going and made the decision before he could second-guess it. "Come stay with us." Valeria blinked. "What?" "At the farmhouse. It's not much. It's actually falling apart in most places. But it's safe and it's quiet and no one's trying to kill you there. I can build ramps, widen doorways, whatever you need. And Lily would love it." "Eli, I can't impose on you like that." "You're not imposing," Eli said. "You said you needed people you could trust. Well, you can trust me. And the farmhouse is big enough for all of us. It's been too empty since Sarah died anyway." He met her eyes. "Let me do this. Let me give you a place to heal." Valeria was quiet for a long moment, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Why are you so kind to me?" "Because someone should be," Eli said simply. "Because you deserve kindness after everything you've been through. And because—" He paused, surprised by his own honesty. "Because I think we're helping each other. You're reminding me what it means to fight for something, to hope for something, and I haven't felt that in a long time." "Okay," Valeria whispered. "Okay, I'll come stay with you, but only until I'm strong enough to manage on my own." "Deal," Eli said, even though he suspected strong enough might take longer than either of them expected. Over the next 3 days, Eli transformed the farmhouse. He worked from dawn until late into the night, building ramps from the porch to the front door and from the back door to the garden. He widened the doorway to the downstairs bedroom, Sarah's old sewing room that had sat empty for 2 years, and installed grab bars in the bathroom. Mrs. Chen brought over extra furniture, and Margaret arranged for medical equipment to be delivered. Lily threw herself into the preparations with 6-year-old enthusiasm, insisting that Valeria would need flowers in her room and pictures on the walls and something happy to look at. She filled the bedroom with her own artwork, crayon drawings of butterflies and houses and stick figure families, and arranged all 17 stuffed animals on the bed so Ms. Valeria won't be lonely. On the third evening, as Eli was finishing the last ramp, Detective Ramos called. "We found David Mercer," Ramos said without preamble. "He was trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands, had $3 million in cash and a fake passport." "Is he talking?" "Singing like a canary. He's given us everything. Dates, recordings, bank transfers showing payments from Camille to the men who attacked Valeria. We've got an airtight case." "And Camille?" "Denying everything. But it won't matter. Between Mercer's testimony and the evidence Valeria provided, the DA is confident. This is going to trial, and they're all going down." Ramos paused. "You should tell Valeria. She'll want to hear it from someone she trusts." When Eli brought the news to the hospital that evening, Valeria's reaction surprised him. She didn't celebrate or cry or show any visible emotion. She just nodded slowly and said, "Good. That's good." "Are you okay?" Eli asked. "I don't know," Valeria admitted. "I thought I'd feel something, relief maybe, or satisfaction, but mostly I just feel tired." She looked at him. "Is that wrong? To not feel anything when the people who tried to kill me are finally being held accountable?" "I think you've been in survival mode for so long that you don't know how to feel anything else yet," Eli said, "but that'll come. When you're ready, when you're safe." "Will I ever really feel safe again?" Valeria asked quietly. "Yes," Eli said with certainty he didn't entirely feel. "Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but someday. I promise." The day Valeria was discharged, the hospital parking lot was swarming with media. Cameras, reporters, vans with satellite dishes, all of them desperate for a statement from the CEO who'd survived an assassination attempt and then destroyed her would-be killers from a hospital bed. Margaret had arranged for a security team, and they formed a tight barrier around Valeria's wheelchair as they moved toward the waiting vehicle. But Valeria stopped halfway across the lot and held up a hand. "I'll give them a statement," she said. "Valeria, you don't have to," Margaret began. "I know, but I want to." Valeria straightened in her wheelchair and faced the cameras. The reporters surged forward, shouting questions, but she waited until they quieted. "3 weeks ago," she said, her voice clear and steady, "my stepsister and 3 members of my board of directors conspired to have me killed. They lured me to a remote location, had me beaten and paralyzed, and left me in a ditch to die. They did this because I refused to compromise the safety of our employees for profit. They did this because they valued money over human life." The cameras flashed like lightning. "But I survived," Valeria continued. "I survived because a good man named Eli Porter found me and refused to leave me to die. He carried me 3 miles through the fog to save my life, and he asked for nothing in return. He reminded me that there are still people in this world who choose kindness over cruelty, who choose courage over convenience." She looked directly into the cameras. "To everyone watching this, to my employees, my partners, my shareholders, I want you to know that Crosstech will emerge from this stronger than ever. We will rebuild our board with people of integrity. We will continue to prioritize safety and ethics over profit, and we will never, ever compromise our values for convenience." "Ms. Cross," a reporter shouted, "are you planning to return as CEO?" "I never stopped being CEO," Valeria said simply. Then she nodded to her security team, and they rolled her toward the car. Eli was waiting by the vehicle. His truck had finally been fixed with money from his first payment from Valeria, and he helped transfer her from the wheelchair into the passenger seat while Margaret folded the chair into the back. "That was a hell of a speech," Eli said as he climbed into the driver's seat. "I meant every word," Valeria said. Then she smiled. A real smile, the first he'd seen that reached her eyes. "Take me home, Eli." Home. The words settled over both of them with unexpected weight. "Yes, ma'am," Eli said, and drove them toward the farmhouse, toward whatever came next, toward the complicated and uncertain future they were building together one day at a time. The November sun was setting as they pulled up the long gravel drive, painting the fields in shades of orange and gold. The farmhouse looked different somehow, still old and worn, but welcoming now, with lights glowing in the windows and smoke curling from the chimney. Lily burst through the front door before Eli had even turned off the engine, Mrs. Chen following at a more sedate pace. "You're here! You're really here!" Lily danced with excitement as Eli unloaded the wheelchair. "I'm really here," Valeria said, letting Eli help her into the chair. She looked up at the farmhouse with its peeling paint and crooked shutters and ramps that still smelled of fresh lumber. "It's perfect." "It's a mess," Eli corrected, "but it's home." Lily grabbed Valeria's hand and pulled her toward the ramp. "Come see your room. I decorated it and everything." They went inside together, the carpenter, the CEO, the little girl, and the elderly woman who'd become their anchor. Margaret had stayed behind to handle the media circus, promising to bring more of Valeria's things tomorrow. For tonight, it was just the four of them in a farmhouse that was slowly becoming something more than just a place to survive. It was becoming a refuge, a home, a place where broken things could begin to heal. Lily gave Valeria a full tour, pointing out every modification Eli had made, every picture she'd drawn, every carefully placed stuffed animal. In the bedroom, Valeria sat in her wheelchair and looked around at the cheerful chaos. The flowers in mason jars, the crayon drawings taped to every available surface, the handmade "Welcome Home" banner hanging crookedly above the bed. "It's beautiful," Valeria said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Lily. Thank you so much." "You're part of our family now," Lily said matter-of-factly. "Daddy said so. That means you stay forever." Over Lily's head, Valeria's eyes met Eli's. He saw the question there, the vulnerability, the fear of hoping for something permanent. "As long as you need," he said quietly. "We're not going anywhere." That night, after Mrs. Chen had gone home and Lily was asleep, Eli found Valeria sitting by the fireplace in the living room, wrapped in a blanket and staring at the flames. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Too quiet," Valeria said. "I lived in the city for so long. There was always noise, always something happening. This silence is—" She paused. "It's peaceful, but it's also making me think too much." "About what?" "About how close I came to dying, about how different my life is going to be now, about whether I can really rebuild everything or if I'm just fooling myself." She looked at him. "Tell me the truth, Eli. Do you think I can do this? Can someone like me, paralyzed, damaged, with a company in chaos, really come back from this?" Eli was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Sarah was pregnant with Lily when she got diagnosed with preeclampsia. Severe case. The doctor said she might not survive the delivery, that we should consider termination. But Sarah refused. She said if there was even a chance we could both survive, she was taking it. And she fought. God, she fought so hard. Special diet, bed rest, constant monitoring. It was hell. "What happened?" Valeria asked softly. "Lily was born 3 months early, weighing 2 pounds. Sarah nearly died. But they both made it. Against the odds, against what the doctors predicted, against everything, they both survived." He leaned forward. "My point is, Sarah taught me that survival isn't about what's probable or easy. It's about being too stubborn to quit. And from what I've seen, Valeria, you're the most stubborn person I've ever met. So yeah, I think you can do this." Valeria was crying again, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm so tired of crying." "Then stop apologizing for it," Eli said. "You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to be scared and angry and overwhelmed. You're allowed to be human." "Even CEOs." "Especially CEOs." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows, but inside the farmhouse was warm and safe, and full of the kind of peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you need to be. "Eli," Valeria said eventually, "thank you for all of this, for carrying me out of that ditch, for believing in me, for giving me a place to heal. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Eli said. "We're just helping each other survive. That's what people do." "Is it?" Valeria asked. "Because in my experience, most people only help if there's something in it for them." "Then you've been around the wrong people," Eli said simply. Valeria smiled, a real smile, tired but genuine. "Maybe I have, but I'm around the right people now." Later, as Eli lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about the strange turn his life had taken. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a broke carpenter walking to a job he desperately needed. His world shrunk down to the simple math of survival. Now he was sharing his home with a billionaire CEO, caught up in murder trials and corporate intrigue, his daughter forming attachments to a woman who might leave as soon as she was strong enough. It should have terrified him, the uncertainty, the complexity, the very real danger that still lurked in the shadows of Valeria's world. But instead he felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. He felt alive. He felt purposeful. He felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a future worth building toward. Down the hall, in the room that had once been Sarah's sewing space, Valeria Cross lay awake in a bed surrounded by stuffed animals and crayon drawings, staring at the dark ceiling and thinking about second chances. About the carpenter who'd saved her life without asking for anything in return. About the little girl who'd welcomed her into their broken family with such open-hearted generosity. About whether someone like her, someone who'd spent her whole life fighting for power and control, could learn to simply accept kindness without suspicion. She didn't have the answer yet. But for the first time since she'd woken up in that hospital bed, she felt something other than fear or rage or exhaustion. She felt hope. And that, she thought as she finally drifted off to sleep, was enough for now. The first morning at the farmhouse, Valeria woke to the sound of chickens. For a moment, disoriented in the unfamiliar room with its slanted ceiling and pale morning light, she thought she was dreaming. Then she remembered. The hospital discharge, the media circus, Eli's quiet offer of refuge. She was in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, sharing space with a widowed carpenter and his 6-year-old daughter, hiding from assassins and corporate vultures while her body slowly remembered how to heal. She sat up carefully, testing the pain levels in her ribs and back. Better than yesterday. Worse than she wanted. The wheelchair waited beside the bed like a silent reminder of everything she'd lost, and for a moment the familiar wave of despair threatened to pull her under. Then she heard Lily's laugh from somewhere outside, bright and uninhibited, and the despair receded slightly. Getting into the wheelchair was still a struggle. Her physical therapist at the hospital had taught her the technique, but theory and practice were different beasts. By the time she'd managed the transfer, she was sweating and breathless and furious at her own weakness. But she was up. That had to count for something. She found them in the kitchen, Eli at the stove flipping pancakes while Lily sat at the table with a coloring book, her tongue stuck out in concentration. The room smelled like coffee and maple syrup and something indefinably homey that made Valeria's chest ache with longing for something she'd never had. "Good morning," Eli said, looking up with a smile. "Hope we didn't wake you. Lily insisted we make chocolate chip pancakes for your first breakfast here." "I told you she'd love them," Lily said proudly. "Everybody loves Daddy's pancakes." "I'm sure I will too," Valeria said, rolling herself to the table. The wheelchair fit easily through the widened doorway. Eli's modifications were already making a difference. "Thank you both for letting me stay here. I know it's an imposition." "Stop," Eli said gently, sliding a plate in front of her. 3 perfect pancakes studded with chocolate chips, butter melting into golden pools. "You're not an imposition. You're our guest, and guests don't apologize for existing." Valeria looked down at the pancakes. So simple, so ordinary, so far removed from the catered meals and business lunches that had defined her life for so long. Her eyes burned with unexpected tears. "They're just pancakes," she said, her voice cracking. "They're not just pancakes," Lily said seriously. "They're magic pancakes.
Daddy makes them when people need to feel better. He made them for me every day for a whole month after Mommy died. Eli's expression flickered with old grief, but he just poured coffee and sat down across from Valeria. Eat before they get cold.
Lily's right. They're better warm. So Valeria ate pancakes in a farmhouse kitchen while a little girl chattered about her stuffed animals, and a carpenter read the newspaper in comfortable silence, and something in her chest that had been clenched tight for weeks slowly began to unwind. The routine of the farmhouse revealed itself gradually over the following days. Eli rose at dawn to handle repairs and maintenance. There was always something that needed fixing in the aging structure. Lily went to school on the bus at 7:30, leaving the house in a whirlwind of backpack and lunchbox and last-minute hugs. Valeria spent her mornings on physical therapy exercises the hospital had prescribed, pushing her body through movements that hurt like hell and yielded frustratingly small progress. Afternoons were for work. Margaret came by daily with laptops, files, and updates from Crosstech. The company was in chaos, board members resigning, shareholders demanding accountability, employees worried about their futures. Valeria conducted video meetings from the farmhouse dining room, the old wooden table serving as her makeshift boardroom, while she navigated corporate crisis management from a wheelchair. The Brazilian facility project is dead, Margaret reported on the third day, setting down a thick folder. Environmental regulators shut it down after we submitted the safety reports Camille tried to bury. The financial loss is significant, but the PR benefit is enormous. We're being praised for choosing ethics over profit. Because I nearly died for those ethics, Valeria said dryly. Nothing like an assassination attempt to make people take your safety concerns seriously. The shareholders' meeting is scheduled for next month, Margaret continued. They'll want to see you in person, Valeria. They'll want reassurance that you're capable of leading the company. In person, Valeria repeated, looking down at her wheelchair. So they can all stare at the crippled CEO and wonder if she's strong enough. So they can see that you survived what would have killed most people and came back fighting, Margaret corrected firmly. But yes, you'll need to be there. After Margaret left, Valeria sat in the dining room surrounded by financial reports and corporate strategy documents, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders. She'd built Crosstech into an empire, but she'd done it with full use of her body, with the ability to stride into boardrooms and dominate through sheer presence. Now she rolled. Now she depended on ramps and grab bars and the kindness of others. Could she still command a room from a wheelchair? Could she still project the authority that had made grown men twice her age defer to her judgment? She didn't know, and the not knowing was terrifying. "You're thinking too loud," Eli's voice came from the doorway. He was covered in sawdust, holding a hammer. I could hear the worry from the workshop. "I have a shareholders meeting in 4 weeks," Valeria said. "Thousands of people whose jobs depend on me convincing them I'm still capable of running a multi-billion-dollar company, and I can't even get into this chair without breaking a sweat." Eli set down the hammer and pulled out a chair, sitting backwards on it with his arms crossed over the back. "My first job after Sarah died was framing a house. Big project, good money, everything I needed to get back on my feet. And I couldn't do it. Couldn't focus, couldn't measure right, couldn't remember basic techniques I'd been doing for 10 years. The foreman pulled me aside on day 3 and said, maybe I should take more time off. What did you do? Told him I couldn't afford more time off, that I had a daughter depending on me and bills that wouldn't wait for me to feel ready. Eli leaned forward. You know what he said? He said being ready isn't a feeling, it's a choice. You choose to show up, you choose to do the work, and eventually your body catches up with your decision. And did it? Catch up? Eventually. Took longer than I wanted, but yeah. He met her eyes. You're already showing up, Valeria. Every morning you get into that chair, every meeting you take, every time you push through the pain to do your therapy. That's you choosing to be ready. The rest will follow. What if it doesn't? What if I get to that shareholders meeting and they see right through me, see that I'm terrified and barely holding together? Then they'll see you're human, Eli said simply. And maybe that's not such a bad thing for a CEO to be. The days developed their own rhythm. Mornings were for therapy and pain management. Afternoons were for corporate firefighting. Evenings belonged to Lily, who decided that Valeria needed to know everything about everything. Her favorite colors, her best friends at school, The complex political dynamics of first-grade recess, and the ongoing adventures of her stuffed animal kingdom. Mr. Pickles is the king, Lily explained one evening, arranging her stuffed animals on Valeria's bed. But Princess Buttercup is actually in charge because she's smarter. Mr. Whiskers is the knight who protects everyone, and Captain Fluffy Pants is the pirate who's secretly good but pretends to be bad. That's quite a story, Valeria said, genuinely charmed. Do they have adventures? All the time. Want to hear about when they fought the dragon who was actually just scared and needed a friend? So Valeria listened to elaborate tales spun with 6-year-old logic and complete sincerity, and found herself more engaged than she'd been in most board meetings. There was something healing about Lily's uncomplicated affection, the way she treated Valeria's wheelchair as unremarkable, the way she crawled into Valeria's lap without hesitation when she wanted a hug. One evening, as Lily dozed against her shoulder during story time, Valeria looked up to find Eli watching them from the doorway. His expression was complicated, tender, and sad, and something else she couldn't quite identify. She's getting attached, he said quietly after he'd carried Lily to bed. They were in the living room, the fire crackling, the house settling into nighttime quiet. To you. I just wanted you to know. I'm getting attached too, Valeria admitted. To both of you. To this. She gestured around the room. I know it's temporary, that I'll eventually go back to my real life, but what if you didn't? Eli interrupted. Valeria blinked. What? What if this became your real life? Not permanently, not forever, but for a while. What if you stayed here while you heal, while you rebuild your company, while you figure out who you are after everything that's happened? He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I'm not saying this right. What I mean is, you don't have to rush back to being who you were. Maybe who you are now is enough. Who I am now is broken, Valeria said quietly. No, Eli said firmly. Who you are now is healing. That's different. That's actually stronger. They sat in silence for a while, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. Finally, Valeria said, I think I'm falling for you, Eli, and it terrifies me. The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Eli went very still. I know it's complicated, Valeria continued quickly. I know you're still grieving your wife, and I'm your guest, and there's this massive power imbalance because I'm paying you and I'm rich and you're not. And it's probably just trauma bonding or gratitude or... Valeria, Eli said gently, stop talking. She stopped. I'm falling for you too, Eli said. Have been since you looked at me in that ditch and whispered, why? Like you couldn't understand why anyone would help you. And you're right, it's complicated as hell. But maybe complicated isn't the same as wrong. What about Sarah? Valeria asked. I don't want to replace her or... You're not replacing her, Eli said. Sarah was my wife, and I loved her, and I'll always love her, but she's gone, and I'm still here, still alive, still allowed to feel things for someone else. He moved to kneel beside her wheelchair, taking her hands. I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. Of messing this up, of hurting you, of failing Lily if this goes wrong. But I'm also tired of being scared all the time. Tired of just surviving instead of living. So what do we do? Valeria whispered. We take it slow, Eli said. We be honest with each other. We figure it out as we go. And if it doesn't work, we deal with that too. And if it does work, then we'll be terrified together, Eli said, echoing the words she'd said to him in the hospital. How's that sound? Valeria laughed through tears and pulled him closer, resting her forehead against his. It sounds perfect. Their first kiss happened 3 days later, on a Sunday morning when Lily was at Mrs. Chen's house learning to make dumplings. Eli had been helping Valeria with her physical therapy exercises, supporting her weight as she practiced standing with the parallel bars he'd installed in her room, when she'd lost her balance and fallen forward into his arms. Sorry, she gasped, embarrassed. I thought I had it that time. You almost did, Eli said, holding her steady. You're getting stronger every day. She looked up at him, at his kind eyes and worn face, and the patient strength that had carried her out of hell, and couldn't help herself. She kissed him. Just a brief press of lips, tentative and questioning. Eli went still for a heartbeat. Then he was kissing her back, one hand cupping her face while the other supported her weight, and it was gentle and careful and perfect. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Valeria said, "Was that okay?" "That was more than okay," Eli said. "Can we do it again?" They did. And this time it was deeper, more certain, a promise of something neither of them quite dared to name yet. When they finally broke apart, Eli helped her back into her wheelchair with hands that shook slightly. "We should probably talk about this," he said. "Probably," Valeria agreed. "But maybe later? Right now I just want to enjoy feeling something other than pain or fear." "I can work with that," Eli said, and kissed her again. The weeks that followed were a strange blend of domesticity and crisis management. Valeria ran her company from the farmhouse dining room while also learning to make grilled cheese sandwiches with Lily. She conducted strategy sessions with her legal team while wearing comfortable clothes that would have horrified her Manhattan stylist. She reviewed quarterly reports in the evening while Eli read bedtime stories to Lily in the next room, his voice a comforting rumble through the walls. The trial date for Camille and the corrupt board members was set for early December. ADA Walsh called regularly with updates. Camille had hired an aggressive defense team and was planning to claim Valeria had staged the whole thing for sympathy and corporate advantage. It was absurd, offensive, and according to Walsh, completely predictable. "She's going to try to paint you as unstable," Walsh explained during one visit. "Use your paralysis as evidence that you're not competent to testify. It won't work. We have too much evidence, but it's going to be ugly." "Let it be ugly," Valeria said coldly. "I want a jury to see exactly what she did to me. I want them to understand that she ordered me beaten and paralyzed for money." The shareholders' meeting loomed closer. Margaret worked with Valeria on her presentation, refining the message. Crosstech was stronger than ever, committed to ethics and safety, and positioned for long-term growth under Valeria's continued leadership. They practiced her entrance, rolling into the conference room with confidence, making eye contact, projecting authority from a seated position. "You've got this," Margaret said after a particularly good practice run. "You're going to walk in there, well, roll in there, and remind them why you built this company in the first place." But doubt crept in during the quiet moments. Late at night, when pain kept her awake, and fear whispered that she'd lost everything that mattered. During therapy sessions when her body refused to cooperate, when the simplest movements required exhausting effort. In the mirror when she saw the scars, the wheelchair, the visible evidence of her vulnerability. Eli found her crying in the bathroom one night, 2 weeks before the shareholders' meeting. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside the wheelchair. "Talk to me." "I can't do this," Valeria said through tears. "I can't stand in front of thousands of people. I can't even stand, period. And convince them I'm strong enough to lead. I'm not strong enough. I'm barely holding together." "You carried a company through corporate conspiracy and assassination attempts," Eli said. "You faced down the people who tried to kill you from a hospital bed. You're rebuilding everything while learning to live in a body that doesn't work the way it used to. If that's not strength, I don't know what is." "But what if they don't see it that way? What if they just see someone broken who can't hack it anymore?" Eli was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "After Sarah died, I had to take Lily to her first day of kindergarten, and I broke down in the parking lot, just completely fell apart. Couldn't stop crying, couldn't pull myself together. All the other parents were staring, and I was sure they were thinking what a mess I was, what a failure of a father." "What happened?" "Another single dad came over, guy whose wife had left him, and he said, 'Shora, brother, anyone who judges you for crying isn't worth impressing. The only thing that matters is that you showed up for your kid.' Then he helped me walk Lily to her classroom, and we became friends." Eli took Valeria's hands. "My point is, the shareholders who matter, the ones who understand what leadership actually means, they're going to see your strength. The ones who don't? Screw them. They were never worth impressing anyway." Valeria laughed despite her tears. "You're very wise for a carpenter." "I'm very wise, period," Eli said with mock offense. "The carpenter thing is just my cover." She pulled him closer and kissed him, a long, slow kiss that tasted like salt and hope and the complicated mess of falling in love while your life was falling apart. "Stay with me tonight?" she asked when they pulled apart. "Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone." So Eli stayed, stretched out on top of the covers while Valeria lay beside him, and they talked in the dark about everything and nothing until she finally drifted off. He watched her sleep for a while, this fierce, brilliant woman who'd survived hell and was still fighting, and wondered how his life had become this, how a walk through fog to a job he never made it to had led to this moment, this person, this completely unexpected second chance at something like happiness. The night before the shareholders' meeting, the farmhouse was full of controlled chaos. Margaret had brought Valeria's business wardrobe, tailored suits and silk blouses that seemed absurdly formal in the rustic setting. Lily helped pick jewelry, insisting that Valeria needed something sparkly to be brave. Mrs. Chen cooked enough food to feed an army, muttering in Cantonese about how Valeria needed strength for battle. Eli found Valeria in her room, staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror he'd installed. She was dressed in a charcoal suit with a crimson blouse, her hair pulled back, her makeup flawless. She looked every inch the powerful CEO, except for the wheelchair, the visible reminder of everything she'd survived. "You look beautiful," Eli said from the doorway. "I look scared," Valeria corrected. "I look like someone pretending to be confident." "Then you look like every other CEO heading into a high-stakes meeting," Eli said. "The only difference is you're honest about being scared." Valeria turned to face him. "Come with me tomorrow, to Chicago, to the meeting." "Valeria, I'm a carpenter. I don't belong in a shareholders' meeting." "You belong wherever I need you," Valeria said fiercely. "And I need you there, not in the room. I know that would be inappropriate, but nearby. In the building, so I know I'm not alone." How could he say no to that? "Margaret can arrange for someone to watch Lily," Eli said. "And yes, I'll come." The relief on Valeria's face was profound. "Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for giving me a home, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, for—" She paused. "For loving me, even though I'm complicated and damaged, and probably going to mess this up." "We're all complicated and damaged," Eli said, crossing the room to take her hands. "And we're all going to mess things up. But we do it together. That's what makes it work." "Is that what we're doing? Making this work?" "I think we're trying to," Eli said carefully. "I think we're building something neither of us expected, but both of us need. And I think that's enough for now." That night, they lay in bed together. A real bed, finally, after weeks of careful distance, and held each other in the darkness. Not making love, not yet, but finding comfort in simple physical closeness. Valeria's head on Eli's chest, his arms wrapped around her, both of them breathing in sync as the old farmhouse creaked and settled around them. "I used to think love was about grand gestures," Valeria said quietly. "Expensive gifts, romantic gestures, all the things money could buy. But this, lying here with you, feeling safe for the first time in months, this is worth more than anything I could purchase." "That's good," Eli said with a smile in his voice, "because I'm pretty much broke and have nothing grand to offer." "You have everything that matters," Valeria said, and kissed the hollow of his throat. "You have kindness and strength and patience and the ability to make the world's best chocolate chip pancakes. Don't forget the extensive stuffed animal knowledge," Eli added. "That's crucial." Valeria laughed and felt the vibration of his answering chuckle against her cheek. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two broken people building something whole from the fragments of their shattered lives. The morning of the shareholders' meeting dawned cold and clear. Eli drove them to Chicago in his truck, now running smoothly thanks to the repairs Valeria had insisted on funding, while Valeria reviewed her notes one final time. Margaret had gone ahead to ensure everything was prepared, and she met them in the Crosstech headquarters parking garage with a security team and a wheelchair-accessible van. "The media is already circling," Margaret warned. "Everyone wants the first photo of you back at headquarters. Are you ready?" "No," Valeria said honestly, "but let's do this anyway." The Crosstech building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel, 60 stories of corporate ambition reaching toward the sky. Valeria's office was on the top floor, with views of the city she'd once commanded like a queen. She hadn't been here since the day she'd left for that fake emergency meeting, the day her world had ended. Now she was rolling through the lobby while employees stopped to stare, some with sympathy, others with barely concealed doubt. Could their CEO really lead from a wheelchair? Could she really be the same fierce leader who'd built this empire? Valeria kept her head high and her expression calm, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The shareholders' meeting was in the main auditorium, capacity 2,000. Every seat was filled. Valeria waited in the wings while the board chairman, a new appointment, carefully vetted after Richard Voss's arrest, gave the opening remarks. Beside her, Margaret adjusted her suit jacket one last time. "You've got this," Margaret whispered. "Remember, they're not judging your body. They're judging your leadership, and your leadership is impeccable." "Miss Cross," the chairman's voice boomed through the sound system. "Would you please join us?" This was it. The moment that would define whether she still had a company or whether the vultures circling her paralyzed body would finally pick her empire clean. Valeria took a breath, squared her shoulders, and rolled onto the stage. The auditorium fell silent. 2,000 pairs of eyes fixed on her wheelchair, her scarred hands, her visible vulnerability. For a moment, Valeria felt the weight of their judgment, their doubt, their pity. Then she saw Eli standing at the back of the auditorium where he'd promised to wait. He caught her eye and nodded, a simple gesture of faith that steadied her more than any corporate strategy ever could. Valeria rolled to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began to speak. 3 weeks ago, my stepsister and 3 members of my board attempted to have me murdered because I refused to compromise worker safety for profit margins. They beat me, paralyzed me, and left me to die in a roadside ditch. They assumed I was too weak to fight back, too broken to rebuild, too damaged to lead. She paused, letting the words settle over the crowd. They were wrong. And then she told them everything, the conspiracy, the assassination attempt, the systematic corruption she'd been fighting against. She showed them the evidence, the financial projections, the plans for moving Crosstech forward with integrity at its core. She spoke with passion and precision about safety standards, ethical practices, and long-term sustainable growth. She spoke as a leader, as a survivor, as someone who refused to let trauma define her. When she finished, the auditorium was silent. Then one person stood and began to clap. Then another. Then a wave of applause swept through the crowd, building until it was thunderous, until 2,000 people were on their feet giving her a standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. Valeria sat in her wheelchair on that stage and let the applause wash over her. Let it fill the hollow places where doubt had lived. Let it remind her that survival was its own kind of victory. When the meeting ended and the votes were tallied, the result was unanimous. Valeria Cross would remain CEO of Crosstech Industries, with full board support and a renewed mandate to lead the company into its next phase of growth. She'd won. Not just the vote, but something bigger. She'd reclaimed her power, her authority, her right to lead despite everything that had been taken from her. Eli found her in her office afterwards, standing at the window. Standing, with the help of the parallel bars her physical therapist had installed, looking out at the city spread below. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it," Valeria corrected, turning to face him with tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, and she let herself break down completely, sobbing against his chest while he held her steady and whispered that she was strong, she was brave, she was enough. "Take me home, Eli," she said when the tears finally stopped. "Not to my penthouse. Home. To the farmhouse. To Lily and Mrs. Chen and that ridiculous falling apart porch. That's where I want to be." "Then that's where we'll go," Eli promised, and he kept that promise, driving them back through the city and into the countryside as the sun set in streaks of orange and gold. They arrived at the farmhouse to find Lily and Mrs. Chen waiting on the porch, and Lily came running down the ramp shouting, "Did you win? Did you beat the bad guys?" "I won," Valeria said, catching Lily in a fierce hug. "We all won." That night, as they sat around the dinner table, Valeria and Eli and Lily and Mrs. Chen sharing a simple meal in a house that was becoming home, Valeria felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt peace. She felt hope. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. With people who loved her not for her money or her power, but simply because she was Valeria. Broken, healing, fighting, surviving Valeria.
and that was more than enough.
Winter came to the farmhouse with the kind of gentle inevitability that made everything feel both temporary and permanent at once. Snow dusted the fields in late November, turning the world outside into something from a postcard, and inside life settled into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to normal. Dangerous because Valeria kept waiting for it to shatter, for reality to intrude and remind her that CEOs didn't belong in falling down farmhouses with carpenters and their daughters, that this strange sanctuary couldn't possibly last. But it did last. Through Thanksgiving, which they celebrated with Mrs. Chen and Margaret, and a turkey that Eli somehow didn't burn despite Valeria's teasing predictions. Through the first real snowfall, when Lily dragged them all outside to build a snowman that leaned precariously to the left. Through the quiet December evenings when Valeria worked from the dining room while Eli repaired the porch and Lily did homework at the kitchen table, the three of them existing in a domestic bubble that felt both foreign and achingly right. The trial was set to begin on December 15th, just 10 days before Christmas. Ada Walsh had called the week before with final preparations, her voice carrying the confidence of someone holding a winning hand. "Camille's defense is falling apart," Walsh had said. "David Mercer's testimony is damning, and we have the financial records showing payments to the men who attacked you. Unless she takes a plea deal, she's looking at 25 to life." "She won't take a deal," Valeria had said with certainty. "Camille's too arrogant. She still thinks she can manipulate her way out of this." She'd been right. Camille refused all plea offers, insisting she'd be vindicated at trial. So now Valeria prepared to face her stepsister in court, to sit across a courtroom and describe in clinical detail how Camille had watched her being beaten, had stood over her broken body, and promised to take good care of the company Valeria had built. The night before the trial, Valeria couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Eli breathed steadily beside her, his arm draped across her waist in a protective gesture that had become habitual. They'd been sharing a bed for 3 weeks now, finding comfort and closeness, even when physical intimacy was limited by her injuries and pain levels. It was enough just to be near him, to feel his warmth and steady presence. "You're thinking too loud again," Eli murmured without opening his eyes. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I've been awake too." He shifted to face her in the darkness. "Talk to me. What's going on in that brilliant, terrifying brain of yours?" "I'm scared," Valeria admitted, "of seeing Camille tomorrow, of having to relive everything in front of a courtroom full of strangers, of not being strong enough to get through my testimony without falling apart." "You're the strongest person I know," Eli said simply. "You've already survived the worst thing that could happen. Everything else is just details." "What if the jury doesn't believe me? What if they think I'm exaggerating or lying or—" "Then they're idiots," Eli interrupted. "And the mountain of evidence Walsh has will convince them anyway. But they will believe you, Valeria, because you're going to tell the truth, and the truth is pretty damn compelling." Valeria turned to press her face against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust and soap that meant safety. "I wish you could be in the courtroom with me." "I'll be right outside," Eli promised, "and the second you're done testifying, I'll be there. You won't face any of this alone." "I used to pride myself on being alone," Valeria said quietly, "on not needing anyone, on being completely self-sufficient. Now I can't imagine facing tomorrow without you." "That's not weakness," Eli said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "That's just being human. We're not meant to do the hard things alone." The courthouse was an imposing stone building in downtown Chicago, all columns and marble steps that would have been impossible for Valeria to navigate before Eli had called ahead to ensure wheelchair access. They arrived early, before the media could fully mobilize, and found Walsh waiting in a private conference room with Detective Ramos and Margaret. "How are you feeling?" Walsh asked, her sharp eyes assessing Valeria's composure. "Terrified, furious, ready to watch my stepsister go to prison." Valeria managed a tight smile. "All of the above." "Good. Channel that fury when you testify. The jury needs to see your strength, but they also need to see what this cost you." Walsh pulled out a folder. "Camille's defense is going to attack your credibility. They'll suggest you were unstable before the attack, that your business decisions were erratic, that you have a history of paranoia. Don't let them rattle you. Stick to the facts, answer only what's asked, and remember that we have mountains of evidence supporting everything you say." What about Richard Voss and Patricia Chen? Valeria asked. Are they testifying? Both took plea deals, Ramos said with satisfaction. Reduced sentences in exchange for testimony against Camille. They're going to bury her. The courtroom was packed when they entered. Valeria rolled down the center aisle with Margaret on one side and Walsh on the other, acutely aware of every eye tracking her movement. The wheelchair had become such a natural part of her life at the farmhouse that she sometimes forgot how other people saw it, as evidence of weakness, of vulnerability, of everything that had been taken from her. But then she caught sight of Eli sitting in the gallery, Lily beside him with Mr. Pickles clutched to her chest, and Mrs. Chen on Lily's other side. They'd come. All of them. Her strange, makeshift family had shown up to support her through the hardest day of her life. Valeria straightened her shoulders and rolled to the witness stand with her head held high. Camille sat at the defense table looking immaculate in a navy suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her expression one of wounded innocence. She'd lost weight since the arrest, and the effect was to make her look fragile, sympathetic, nothing like the cold-eyed woman who'd orchestrated an assassination. When their eyes met across the courtroom, Camille's mask slipped for just a moment. Valeria saw the hatred there, the rage at being thwarted, and felt a savage satisfaction. Camille had wanted her dead and defeated. Instead, Valeria was here, alive and fighting, about to destroy her stepsister's freedom with nothing but the truth. Walsh's direct examination was thorough and devastating. Valeria described the fake emergency meeting, the drive to the remote cabin, the moment she realized she'd been betrayed. She described the 3 masked men, the systematic beating, Camille's presence throughout. What did your stepsister say to you? Walsh asked. Before they left you in that ditch. Valeria's voice was steady despite the memories threatening to pull her under. She said, "Don't worry, Val. I'll take good care of Crosstech for you." Then she told the men to make sure I was never found. A ripple went through the courtroom. Several jurors leaned forward, their attention fixed on Valeria with expressions ranging from horror to sympathy. "And how did you survive?" Walsh asked gently. "A man named Eli Porter found me the next morning while walking to work. He carried me 3 miles to his home and called for help. He saved my life." Walsh nodded. No further questions. Camille's defense attorney was a sharp-faced man named Thornton who'd built his reputation on shredding witnesses. He approached the stand with the confidence of someone who believed he could break Valeria's testimony. "Ms. Cross, isn't it true that you were under enormous stress in the weeks before this alleged attack?" he began. "I was under the normal stress of running a multi-billion-dollar company," Valeria replied coolly. "And isn't it true that you'd been making increasingly erratic decisions? Killing profitable projects, refusing to listen to board advice, alienating key stakeholders?" "I was refusing to compromise worker safety for profit margins," Valeria corrected. "If that's erratic, then yes, I was being erratic." Thornton smiled like he'd scored a point. "You were also using prescription pain medication at the time, weren't you? For a chronic condition?" "I have a documented pain condition that I manage with appropriate medication prescribed by my doctor. That has nothing to do with— It has everything to do with your credibility," Thornton interrupted. "You were stressed, medicated, and by your own admission, making decisions your board disagreed with. Isn't it possible that your memory of events is confused? That what you think happened isn't what actually occurred?" Valeria's hands clenched on the arms of her wheelchair. She wanted to scream at this man, to make him understand that no amount of medication could make her forget watching her stepsister order her death. But Walsh's earlier advice echoed in her mind. Stick to the facts. Don't let them rattle you. "My memory is perfectly clear," Valeria said. "I remember every moment of that night, every word Camille said, every blow those men landed, every second I lay in that ditch wondering if I would die there." Her voice rose slightly. "And I especially remember my stepsister's face as she watched them destroy my wheelchair and beat me until I couldn't move. No amount of medication could make me forget that." "But you can't actually prove it was your stepsister who orchestrated this, can you?" Thornton pressed. "You can't prove she gave those orders, can't prove she was even there." "We have 3 witnesses who place Ms. Camille Cross at the scene," Walsh interrupted, standing, "including David Mercer, who was Ms. Cross's co-conspirator and has provided detailed testimony about the planning and execution of this crime. This line of questioning is irrelevant." "Sustained," the judge said. "Mr. Thornton, move on." The cross-examination continued for another hour, Thornton trying every angle to discredit Valeria's testimony. But she held firm, refusing to let him twist her words or undermine her truth. By the time Walsh called for redirect, Valeria was exhausted but unbroken. "Ms. Cross," Walsh said gently, "how has this attack affected your life?" Valeria looked down at her wheelchair, at her scarred hands, at the visible evidence of everything Camille had taken from her. "I'm paralyzed from the waist down. I may never walk again. I have chronic pain that makes every day a struggle. I nearly lost my company, my career, everything I'd built." She paused, then looked directly at the jury. "But I survived, and I'm rebuilding, and I'm here to make sure my stepsister pays for what she did." When she was finally released from the stand, Eli was there to meet her in the hallway, pulling her into his arms the moment they were out of sight of the courtroom. "You were amazing," he said against her hair. "So strong, so brave." "I wanted to kill him," Valeria said, her voice shaking. "That defense attorney. I wanted to make him understand what it was like, what Camille did to me." "You did make them understand," Eli said firmly. "The jury saw it. They believed you. I watched their faces, Valeria. You won them over." Lily appeared then, squeezing between them to wrap her small arms around Valeria's waist. "You were so brave," she said solemnly, "just like Princess Buttercup when she fought the dragon." Despite everything, Valeria laughed. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." The trial lasted another week. Richard Voss testified, describing in damning detail how Camille had approached him with the plan to remove Valeria permanently. Patricia Chen wept on the stand as she admitted her role in the conspiracy, claiming she'd been pressured into it but had never wanted anyone hurt. David Mercer was the star witness, his testimony laying out every aspect of the plot: the fake emergency meeting, the hired attackers, the specific instructions Camille had given about making sure Valeria's body was never found. Through it all, Camille maintained her facade of innocence, shaking her head sadly at each new revelation, as if she couldn't believe people were telling such lies about her. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing payments to the attackers, text messages between the conspirators, security footage placing Camille at the cabin on the night of the attack. On December 22nd, after just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty. On all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, assault with intent to cause great bodily harm. Valeria sat in the courtroom and watched Camille's face collapse as the verdict was read, watched her stepsister finally understand that she'd lost everything in her grab for power. The judge remanded Camille to custody immediately, and as bailiffs led her away in handcuffs, Camille looked back at Valeria one final time. "This isn't over," Camille said, her voice cold with promise. "Yes, it is," Valeria replied calmly. "You tried to kill me, and you failed, and now you're going to prison for the rest of your life. It's very much over." Outside the courthouse, with snow falling gently and media cameras flashing, Eli wrapped his arms around Valeria and said, "It's done. You're free." And for the first time since that terrible night in the cabin, Valeria believed it. She was free. Not just legally, not just physically, but emotionally. She'd faced her demons and survived. She'd rebuilt her life from the ruins Camille had tried to create. She was free. Christmas at the farmhouse was chaotic and perfect. Eli and Lily had decorated with an enthusiasm that made up for any lack of sophistication. A crooked tree in the corner dripping with handmade ornaments, lights strung haphazardly across the porch, a wreath on the door that Lily had made from pine cones and glitter. Margaret came for dinner, along with Mrs. Chen and 3 of Mrs. Chen's grandchildren. They ate too much, laughed too loud, and filled the old house with the kind of joy it had been missing for too long. Late that night, after everyone had left and Lily was asleep dreaming of the bicycle Santa had brought, Valeria and Eli sat by the fire with mugs of hot chocolate in comfortable silence. "I have something for you," Valeria said, pulling a small wrapped box from her pocket. "I know we said no presents, but—" "We definitely said no presents," Eli interrupted with a smile, "which is why I also have something for you." They exchanged gifts at the same moment. Eli's was a tiny box wrapped in newspaper comics because he'd run out of wrapping paper. Valeria's was elegant, professionally wrapped in silver paper with a perfect bow. "You first," Valeria said. Eli opened the box and found a key inside. Not just any key, but an ornate antique key on a silver chain. "What is this?" "It's the key to the original Crosstech building," Valeria said. "The first facility my father built before the company became what it is now. I bought the building last week. It's been abandoned for years, and I want to restore it, turn it into something meaningful." She paused, her eyes bright. "I want to turn it into a community center, a place for job training, after-school programs, resources for families who need help. And I want you to head the construction project." Eli stared at her. "Valeria, I'm not qualified to run something that big." "You're qualified to understand what matters," Valeria said. "You know what it's like to struggle, to need a hand up instead of a handout. I don't need someone with fancy credentials. I need someone with heart, someone who'll build something that actually helps people." She took his hand. "This is my legacy, Eli. Not Crosstech, not the billions in the bank. This, making something good from all the terrible things that happened." "It's perfect," Eli said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you. Now open yours," Valeria prompted, gesturing to the box in her lap. She unwrapped it carefully to find two small wooden boxes inside, each beautifully crafted with intricate inlaid designs. She opened the first and found a key, a simple house key on a leather cord. "It's the key to the farmhouse," Eli said quietly. "Officially. I'm signing the deed over to both of us. Joint ownership. This is your home now, Valeria, for as long as you want it to be." Valeria's hands trembled as she opened the second box. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond flanked by two emeralds. It was beautiful, understated, perfect. "Eli," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to marry me," Eli said quickly. "Not yet. Not until you're ready. But I wanted you to have this, to know that I'm serious about us, about building a life together, about—" Valeria cut him off with a kiss, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she said, "Yes." "Yes what?" Eli asked, confused. "Yes, I'll marry you," Valeria said, laughing through tears. "You said you weren't asking, but I'm answering anyway. Yes. 1,000 times yes." "You're sure?" Eli's voice was raw with hope and fear. "Because it's complicated. You're a billionaire CEO, and I'm a carpenter. You have a whole world in Chicago, and I have this falling apart farmhouse. People are going to talk, are going to say—" "I don't care what people say," Valeria interrupted fiercely. "I don't care about complications or logistics or what makes sense on paper. I care about you, about Lily, about the life we're building here." She held up the ring. "Put it on me." So Eli did, sliding the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her, which of course it had. Eli had spent weeks working with a jeweler, describing exactly what he wanted, using money he'd saved from the salary Valeria was paying him. "The emeralds are for Lily," Eli explained, "her birthstone, because she's part of this too. Part of us." "It's perfect," Valeria said, holding her hand up to the firelight and watching the gems sparkle. "Everything about this is perfect." They made love that night for the first time since the attack, slowly and carefully, learning each other's bodies and boundaries. It was tender and healing and absolutely right, a physical claiming that matched the emotional commitment they'd already made. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Valeria said, "I have one more gift for you. Well, for us. For all of us." "What is it?" "I'm stepping back from Crosstech. Not leaving entirely, but transitioning to chairwoman of the board. I'm hiring a new CEO to handle day-to-day operations while I focus on the foundation work, the community center, the employee safety initiatives, all the things that actually matter." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "I spent my whole life building an empire, Eli, but empires are cold and lonely. I want to build something warmer, something that makes a difference." "You're sure?" Eli asked. "Crosstech is your legacy." "Crosstech is a company," Valeria corrected. "My legacy is going to be what I do next, the lives I improve, the families I help, the change I make in the world." She kissed him softly. "And the family I build with you. That's the legacy I want. Spring came late that year, the snow lingering into March before finally giving way to mud and green shoots. Valeria's physical therapy had progressed to the point where she could stand with assistance, could take a few shuffling steps with a walker before exhaustion set in. The doctor said she might never walk unassisted, that the spinal damage was too severe. But she was standing, moving, defying the limitations they'd tried to place on her. The community center project broke ground in April with a ceremony that drew media attention from across the country. Valeria gave a speech from her wheelchair about second chances and the importance of helping those who'd been knocked down, and Eli stood beside her in his nicest jeans and a button-down shirt, looking uncomfortable but proud as she credited him with inspiring the whole project. 3 months ago, I was dying in a ditch, Valeria told the assembled crowd. And a man I'd never met carried me 3 miles to safety. He didn't know who I was, didn't know if I could pay him back, didn't expect anything in return. He just helped because that's what decent people do. This center is built on that principle, that we help each other, that we lift each other up, that we refuse to leave anyone behind. The wedding was planned for June, a small ceremony in the farmhouse garden with just close friends and family. Lily was beyond excited about being flower girl and had already planned her outfit down to which stuffed animals would attend the ceremony. Mrs. Chen was baking the cake, and Margaret was handling the logistics with the efficiency that had made her invaluable at Crosstech. 2 weeks before the wedding, Valeria got a call from the prison. Camille wanted to see her. Absolutely not, Eli said immediately when Valeria told him. You don't need that in your life. You don't need to give her any more of your time or energy. I know, Valeria agreed, but I think I need closure. I need to look her in the eye and know that I survived everything she tried to do to me. So on a sunny May afternoon, Valeria drove to the prison with Eli beside her and Margaret following in a second car. The meeting was in a private room, supervised by guards, with strict time limits and protocols. Camille looked terrible. Prison had stripped away her polish, leaving her pale and drawn in an orange jumpsuit that washed out her complexion. But her eyes were still hard when she looked at Valeria through the reinforced glass. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Camille said, "You won. Are you here to gloat?" "No," Valeria said calmly. "I'm here to let you go." "Let me go?" Camille laughed bitterly. "I'm in prison for 25 years, Val. You can't let me go anywhere." "I'm letting go of the anger," Valeria clarified. "The hatred, the need for revenge, all of it. You tried to destroy me, and instead you destroyed yourself. That's justice enough. I don't need to carry this poison anymore." "How noble," Camille sneered. "How very evolved of you. But we both know you're only here because you want to rub my face in your happiness. Show me how you've rebuilt your perfect life while I rot in here." "I'm not here to be cruel," Valeria said. "I'm here to tell you that I forgive you." The words seemed to hit Camille like a physical blow. She jerked back, her expression twisting with rage and something that might have been pain. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare forgive me like you're better than me!" "I'm not better than you," Valeria interrupted gently. "I'm just luckier. I was found by someone who chose kindness. I was given a second chance, and I'm taking it." She leaned forward slightly. "You could have had everything, Camille. The company, the success, even my respect if you'd just been patient. But you chose violence instead. You chose hatred, and now you have to live with that choice." "I chose power," Camille said coldly. "I chose not to wait for your approval, not to live in your shadow, not to—" "You chose wrong," Valeria said simply. "And I hope someday you can admit that to yourself and find some peace. But whether you do or not, I'm moving on. I'm getting married in 2 weeks to a good man who loves me. I'm building a life that matters, and I'm done letting what you did define me." She stood to leave, and Camille's composure finally cracked. "You were supposed to die," she said, her voice breaking. "You were supposed to die, and I was supposed to win. How did you survive? How are you happy when I took everything from you?" Valeria looked at her stepsister, this woman who'd once been family, who'd shared holidays and childhood memories before ambition had twisted her into something monstrous, and felt nothing but pity. "You didn't take everything," Valeria said quietly. "You took my mobility, my sense of safety, my ability to trust easily. But you didn't take what mattered. My strength, my courage, My capacity to love and be loved, those things are still mine, and they're the only things that ever really mattered. She left without looking back, rolling out of the prison and into the sunlight where Eli waited by the car. "How do you feel?" he asked, helping her transfer into the passenger seat. "Free," Valeria said, and meant it. Finally, completely free. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of June morning that made you believe in magic. The garden behind the farmhouse had been transformed with strings of lights and simple flower arrangements, white chairs set up in rows facing an arch covered in climbing roses. 50 people, a small gathering by billionaire standards, but perfect by Valeria's current ones, settled into their seats as the string quartet Margaret had hired began to play. Lily walked down the aisle first, scattering rose petals with intense concentration, Mr. Pickles tucked under one arm. She took her place beside the arch with enormous pride, her flower crown slightly crooked and absolutely perfect. Then Valeria appeared at the end of the aisle, and Eli's breath caught in his throat. She was standing, not in her wheelchair, not leaning on a walker, but standing with her arm linked through Margaret's for support, taking slow, careful steps down the aisle. Her dress was simple white silk that draped elegantly over her still healing body, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face glowing with happiness and determination. The guests gasped, then began to applaud, but Valeria had eyes only for Eli. She moved toward him step by step, each movement a small victory, each foot forward a declaration that she was still fighting, still surviving, still choosing hope over despair. By the time she reached the arch, tears were streaming down both their faces. "You're walking," Eli said, his voice breaking. "I'm walking," Valeria confirmed and laughed. "Surprise. My physical therapist cleared me yesterday. I wanted to wait. Wanted you to see." She gestured down at her feet, at the ground she was standing on through sheer force of will. "I wanted you to see that miracles are possible." The ceremony itself was simple and beautiful. They'd written their own vows, standing together under the rose-covered arch, while Lily held both their rings and tried very hard not to fidget. "Eli Porter," Valeria said, her voice clear and strong. "You found me in the darkest moment of my life and refused to leave me there. You carried me through the fog, gave me a home when I had nowhere to go, and showed me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about getting back up after you've been shattered. You taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation, but about choosing to love someone through their worst days and celebrating their best ones. I promise to love you with that same fierce loyalty. To be your partner, your friend, your safe harbor. To build a life with you that matters, that makes a difference, that's built on kindness instead of conquest. I promise to be the person you already see when you look at me. Someone brave enough to accept help, strong enough to give it, and wise enough to know the difference." She slid the ring onto his finger, her hand steady despite her tears. Eli took a shaky breath and began his own vows. "Valeria Cross, when I found you in that ditch, I thought I was saving your life, but really, you were saving mine. You reminded me that I was still alive, that I was still capable of feeling things other than grief. You showed me that it's possible to rebuild after tragedy, to find hope in the ruins, to open your heart again even when you're terrified it'll break." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Sarah was my first great love. She gave me Lily, gave me years of happiness, and her memory will always be part of me. But you're my second chance, Valeria, my unexpected miracle. And I promise to spend the rest of my life earning the gift of your trust. I promise to carry you when you need carrying, to stand beside you when you need a partner, and to get out of your way when you need to prove your own strength. I promise to build a life with you that honors what we've survived and celebrates what we've become. I promise to love you not despite your scars, but because of them, because they're proof that you fought and won." He slid the ring onto her finger beside the engagement ring he'd given her at Christmas. The minister pronounced them married, and they kissed while their small gathering cheered, and Lily declared it the best wedding ever, despite having never attended another one. The reception was held under a tent in the garden, with Mrs. Chen's incredible food and a small dance floor where Lily insisted on dancing with both her new mothers, because she'd decided Valeria was her second mother, and no amount of adult explaining about stepmothers versus mothers could change her mind. Late in the evening, as the party wound down and the last guest departed, Eli found Valeria sitting in her wheelchair at the edge of the garden, looking out over the darkening fields. "Tired?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Exhausted," Valeria admitted, "but the good kind. The kind that comes from standing for an hour instead of sitting, from dancing with your daughter, from celebrating instead of surviving." "About that standing thing," Eli said. "How long have you been able to do that?" 3 weeks. The physical therapist said it was unprecedented progress, that the damage to my spine should have prevented this much recovery. But I was stubborn." She smiled. "You know how I get." "I do know," Eli said, taking her hand. "So what now, Mrs. Porter? Where do we go from here?" Valeria was quiet for a moment, considering. Then she said, "Forward. We keep moving forward. We build the community center. We raise Lily. We make chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings. We live." "That simple?" "That's simple," Valeria confirmed. "We survived the worst things that could happen to us. Everything else is just details." They sat together in the gathering darkness, watching fireflies begin to dance across the fields, and Valeria thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a ditch where she'd nearly died to a garden where she'd married the man who saved her life. From a wheelchair that represented loss to steps that represented hope. From a billionaire CEO defined by her power to a woman defined by her capacity to love and be loved. Lily came running out of the house, her flower crown hanging by one ear, shouting about how Mrs. Chen had saved cake for breakfast tomorrow. She climbed into Valeria's lap with the unself-conscious ease of a child who had never known a time when her second mother couldn't hold her. "Did you have a good wedding?" Lily asked seriously. "The best wedding," Valeria confirmed, wrapping her arms around this child who'd welcomed her so completely. "Good, because now we're a real family, forever and ever." "Forever and ever," Valeria agreed, and caught Eli's eye over their daughter's head. 6 months ago, she'd been dying in a roadside ditch, certain her story was ending. But it hadn't ended. It had transformed, rebuilt itself into something she never could have imagined, something better. She thought about the coordinates Eli had engraved on the inside of her wedding ring, the exact location of Highway 47 where he'd found her, the place where everything had ended and begun simultaneously, where death had met rescue, where despair had encountered hope, where a broken woman and a grieving man had started building something neither of them knew they needed. The road to love, Valeria thought, sometimes really does begin in a ditch. Sometimes the miracle isn't being found, but daring to reach for someone else in the fog. Sometimes you have to lose everything before you can understand what really matters. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance. A chance to rebuild not just your life, but yourself. A chance to create something new from the fragments of what was broken. A chance to discover that the strongest foundations are built not on power or money or control, but on kindness, courage, and the simple choice to not leave anyone behind. As the stars came out over the farmhouse and Lily fell asleep in Valeria's lap and Eli held them both close, Valeria Cross Porter finally understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. Not in money or success or corporate empires, but in the things that couldn't be taken away: love, family, hope, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Home, whole, healed, and ready for whatever came next because she knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't face it alone. The fog had lifted, the storm had passed, and in its wake, something beautiful had grown. Sometimes, Valeria thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, the most important thing you can do is survive. And sometimes survival is just the beginning of the story. The rest is about learning how to live.